Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Hash Church episode 2. Well, Hash Church 2.0, episode 19. I literally thought it was like episode 16 and then 17 and then 18. And so you probably noticed I changed the title quite a few times. Fingers crossed that it works today. Fingers crossed that I can hear the people that get invited in. I'm going to send out the link right away. And like I said, fingers crossed. Well, that's interesting. Got to copy that link again. So I hope everyone's having a great day. I noticed there were some people waiting in the chat room for Hash Church to start, which is always great. We love that. All right. So there's that. And then there's that. And then there's actually 3 different places I have to go to send these links out. So fingers crossed that when people come in, I can actually hear them, because I miss all you guys. I miss our Saturday conversations. I'm always was a big fan of Hash Church. Welcome, Skunkman Sam. Hello, hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. Oh,
Can you hear me?
I see you have Chimera with you.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you perfect. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
No. Yes,
You hear me?
Fine.
All right. That was exciting. That was exciting. How are you doing, Mr.
Yes.
Skunkman? You can't hear.
Conversation is lagged, though.
Oh, weird. I have pretty fast internet right now, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Let's see if we get some other folks in here and figure it out. Sorry that I'm lagging. I just heard from Forrest. He just sent me an email saying he's unfortunately not going to be able to make it. They're having a small gathering for Silas's birthday today and got a list of chores to get through. So we should send Silas a happy birthday. How you doing, Wade?
I'm good, Marcus. How about you?
Well, I was having a little bit of problem with my audio with Skunkman. He said it was delayed. It might be his computer. Do you hear me fine?
I'm hearing you fine this time around, Marcus.
Okay, Well, great. Nice to see you.
We can hear you, Sam, or I can. Can you hear me, Marcus?
I can hear you very well. Sam's a little bit cutting out. I think he might need to like restart his computer or something, but we'll see what happens. We've got a nice slow start to church today, but the bottom line is there's a couple of us in here, and that's all we need to start a conversation. I just wished Silas a happy birthday, actually. I heard it was his birthday today.
Yes. 12 years old now.
Wow.
For a child that his parents were told they shouldn't expect him to make it to 10, so we're thrilled.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. I miss Forrest and Silas and the whole crew. It's been a long time since we've had them on the show. Welcome to Mike West. Mike's got his farmer's gear on. He's like in farmer mode, I can tell. Hey, what's going on, dude?
We're hanging out.
Beautiful. Little Hash Church, and I like how you guys are huddled around the Hash Church phone.
How's it going, Marcus?
It's going good, man. How about yourself?
Doing well.
Excellent. Excellent. Good to hear. Good.
I'm having trouble hearing those guys.
Part of the country, but
so I'm going to restart. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, sounds good. Try Chrome. Chrome is what I'm having my best luck on. Okay. I was having bad luck with Safari, not being able to hear what people were saying. So I guess Wade was having that problem with you guys, but I can hear you perfectly perfect. Skunkman Sam just went and reset his shit as well. We're having mild technical difficulties, but hopefully you guys have a bong somewhere nearby and you're doing bong rips of the full melt. I'm sure that's happening. I wish. Is it working now, Sam? We got slow going today here. I wonder how many people there are in this room.
I hope so.
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. 100%. We got a small group in here today. We said, I think Wendy and Coltyn Turner said they were going to pop in later. And Etienne, unfortunately, was unable to make it. But there were some other yeses that I got for sure that made me feel like, yeah, we should do a hash church today. So we'll throw it around. We'll see what happens. Everything going good with you guys?
Going good. Just, setting up this facility, and we'll talk more about this facility a little bit later, but setting it up, do some research this year, and it's a pretty impressive facility. So just kind of working through all the kinks, getting everything running, and then
Back
purring.
online.
Yeah.
And
The testament to how well thought out it was that I can start up after another 10 years of sitting. So that's nice.
For sure. Oh, they got the link. Okay. Dragonfly Earth Medicine said they were having a hard time. They weren't getting the link. And for whatever reason, it's not letting me send the link in. I'm having mild computer technology problems here as well.
Try turning it off and on again.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Oh, they said they got the link. Okay. So the email that I sent out probably showed up a little late. And so now they're going to come in here soon. You know what? I used to be so nervous about starting Hash Church. I'd get so, not aggressive, but just kind of like, I would just want it to work. I would just want Hash Church to work. And now I'm so relaxed and chill about it. What's going on, Collin?
What up, guys? Sorry, I'm on my phone today. I'm having issues. So.
Well, put that shit down on a table so it doesn't move. And,
I will.
And you'll be laughing. Mike and Johnny are also on the phone.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go outside. I gotta get some headsets going. So, how y'all doing?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. It was a little bit of a slow start trying to get the links out to everyone.
Right on.
It's not always easy, man.
Nope, not at all.
But we managed to get.
I'm gonna get my rig, and I'll be back. I'm gonna put myself on pause.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, this is so strange. I've now frozen my messenger with Josh and Kelly, and I can't send them any message. So they said they just got it. Be here in 2 seconds, but I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know. It won't even let me force quit on Messenger.
Is my microphone working right now?
Yes.
Yes, but I can't hear your turntable. That was a joke.
Is my microphone working? Yes or no?
Yes. Now,
Is there two
No,
turntables?
because I
are
can't.
your speakers working is another question, because we're answering yes every time you ask. Yes. Johnny B got the link. I don't know. I sent the link to a bunch of people, but I think we should start with a bong rip. What better way to start Hash Church than with a bong rip? So please, everyone in the congregation, get your shit together. What's that? Sam's having problems, technical problems. Let's have a little dabadoodle here.
No, my speakers are working. I'm just.
Yeah, you're cutting out a lot. Your shit is not on point right now. I don't know what's going on. All right, turning me up into headphones. Turn me up into headphones. Turn it up. Turn it up. Remember that scene from Dave Chappelle show? I think it was Dylan. I spit mad fire. I'm guessing. He'd probably know. He was the one that said it in chat. All right. Wendy Turner said she's running a little late and she'll show up as soon as possible. So I think it's a good time for a bong rip for those of you that can do bong rips. I don't know what's going on over there in middle America. Oh, you pulling bong rips out of his ear? It looked like you just pulled a bong rip right out of his ear. You guys puffing on that wax? You guys are muted, so I don't hear you. Colin's muted as well.
Yeah, we're having issues with our headset or earbuds.
Oh my God. I'm back. Oh, it's just another ridiculous day on Hash Church. Let's hope that it works out. Let's hope that we get everyone working with their microphones and their speakers, and it'd be nice to have a conversation.
Well, I started.
Oh yeah.
I hear you okay, Sam, but you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if it's when other people talk or if it's because we don't have our microphones muted or what it is. But I can definitely hear
You know
you.
what? I need to go get some water.
Oh yeah, you need to go get some water.
Oh
Grab-
yeah,
grab me a glass.
I will. Well, I got to get some water in two different situations.
All right, so this is what I'm all about right now. Check this shit out. Measuring this temperature of my banger. Isn't that great? Little temperature gauge.
Next level.
Dude, I am so loving my TempTech USA. Every time I bring it up, someone's like, why don't you just use a $10 thermometer gun? I'm like, I don't know, because you got to hold that in your hand and it's ghetto. Like, I'm happy with this. It sits right under my banger. I'm watching it go from 700 degrees down to 694. Oh, right around 680 is when I'll hit it.
Just rubber band that shit right onto the rig. Make it part of the.
Yeah, Mark, those are 3D printed, right?
I believe they're 3D printed, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll. That's going to end up being a souvenir because eventually, once they, they'll usually when you're prototyping stuff, you'll 3D print it, and then once you kind of get the prototype worked out, actually get it injection molded to shape it. Hopefully, they can start, but when they actually start doing the molds for them, they can start making them out of hemp plastic.
Ooh.
Totally. How fucking cool would that be? They're pretty cool guys. I've been talking to them, and I definitely am an unapologetic gadget geek. Whoever just said that, PK Brewer. It's true. I love the gadgets. Oh, wow. I just, check this out. I'm leaning down, and my shirt made it look like it was one of the boxes in the chat. And I was like, oh, who's that? That looks familiar. This is the Legends of Hash shirt from Barcelona this year. You can check it out. The Lebanese hash makers going to town there.
That must have been a good dance.
Do I have part Scottish in me, Bubbleman? Yes, I do, Alan Rohan. I do. I have a little bit of Irish and a little bit of Scottish in me. And sometimes when I'm doing the, oh, listen to you, Mr. fucking Birds. Holy shit. Those birds.
Sorry, bud.
That's awesome.
I can turn it off, man.
Don't turn the birds off, bro.
Can you guys turn it down back there?
Oh, dude, he's the bird whisperer. He's the bird whisperer. So Collin's out on the East Coast.
Yeah.
You guys are in like Middle America. I'm over on the West Coast, and Sam's way over across the Atlantic Ocean. So that's what we got going on right now.
Ooh, yeah.
Why
My
Nice.
cat knows what to do to those birds.
Dude, your cat must be tripping on those birds. They're coming through so clear. Like, what the fuck?
All right, I'll go on mute.
What to do to
It sounds like he's got like a high-end like microphone or something. Like he's pulled out one of his studio mics and he's like recording birds from a kilometer away. Very nice, very nice. So I did a little wake and bake yesterday. Hey, what's going on there, Dragonfly Earth Medicine? You guys in the room, or is it sketching out on you? I see you're it shows that you're
We're
muted.
here now. We're getting it worked out here. There we go.
Nice.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, guys. You guys are kind of a little blurry and a little dark, but it's great to see your silhouettes.
Yeah. Hopefully it gets changed here soon. We get a little light, but nice to see you all this morning. How you doing today?
It's good, man. It's been a nice slow start to church. Mostly we've been technical difficultying our mics and our, the longer we take that we don't do a church, the more it's kind of like rusty when you get in the room. But I did a little wake and bake yesterday just before church just to suss out the vibes. And I smashed an hour on my wake and bake just by myself. So I figured if we can't, there's so much to talk about right now, because if you haven't noticed, Hash Church was a pretty big sort of place for us to talk about these important situations. And with Hash Church not really around, there's not really another spot like it. There's spots like it. There are many spots like it, but there's no real spot like it. So I thought, we kind of owe it to the community and ourselves to get together and shoot the shit, see how everyone's doing, maybe mute Sam while he fucking coughs in my ear for the 15th time in a row. And I'm just joking, Sam, but I did mute you. and just have a conversation. You know, obviously we're going to get into some things here today. I definitely want to talk about Phylos. I haven't had a chance to talk to Mowgli and invite him in. And I know Kevin McKernan, who has been one of the big oppositions online, is also unable to come in because he's having a barbecue. But it'd be kind of cool to have a little conversation about that, but also a conversation about all these different things that are going on in Canada and in the US and the Farm Bill and all these different things that are occurring in Colombia and the Caribbean and in Europe. And there's a lot going on in the industry right now. A lot going on. And I just feel that when we're not able to gather, we don't, that information kind of doesn't really get, you know, put into, discussed and put into a really
gotta get refreshed in the mind and let those neurons connect and ideas get flowing.
Yeah, and obviously Hash Church has always been a great gathering of the minds. You know, what doesn't matter what you do in the industry, it's a great place where we can all kind of gather around the campfire and talk about things as they pop up. So obviously we're open invitation to Mowgli, open invitation to Kevin. Let's try and get them on and actually hash this out, and you know, we can certainly talk about that a little bit of that controversy, because there's a lot of stuff that's kind of popped up over the last month, and it's all things that, you know, growers and breeders and industry folks need to kind of understand, because it's, you know, the intellectual property rights of cannabis. As much as we want to keep this in a fair and open community, we have to be able to protect the growers. We have to be able to protect the breeders. We have to, and first and foremost, we have to be able to protect the patients. And I have my personal thoughts on it. Obviously, you know, being a medical patient myself, we want to see the patients have safe access no matter where they are. But at the same hand, obviously, if, you know, growers, breeders, genetics companies, anybody starts spending, you know, lots of time, money, resources developing IP, whether that be genetics or processes or potentially developing patents, you know, we as industry leaders have to be able to set the example. That way, you know, when as Wall Street or the public companies kind of form, you know, we set that good example. And, you know, for best example is some of the predatory patents out there for cannabis cultivars. A lot of those cannabis cultivar patents are fairly broad, and they're going to have to get you know, fought in court. But, you know, when you look at the transition from black market, gray market to regulated markets, there's a big learning curve that has to go through. And, you know, the USPTO doesn't go to the black market to research potential patents. So, you know, we have to be able to set the example. And, you know, for patents, you know, the governments that issue those patents make just as much money when the patents get challenged as they do when the patents get issued. So what we've kind of seen come up is, you know, a couple different intellectual property developments in the industry, both genetics as well as technologies, and we have to be able to not only develop that IP, protect that IP, but also be able to provide that IP to the public. I know I was a cannabis refugee 15 years ago, moving to a state that, you know, because I needed CBD in my life, and in Texas, 15 years ago, there wasn't CBD available. So, yeah, tons of cool stuff. It's going to be an interesting year. West Coast, it looks like weather report, according to the Farmer's Almanac, West Coast is going to have a fairly phenomenal year, but a little bit dry. So there's going to be some forest fires kind of pop up on the West Coast. Kind of where we're at, Central America and the Midwest, it's actually a fairly wet spring. A lot of the farmers we've been talking to are, you know, when you apply for crop insurance, cannabis aside, cannabis can't have crop insurance yet, but there are some federal bills that would include crop insurance for industrial hemp. But in the Midwest, you know, we've had a fairly wet spring, and yep, all the corn farmers, you know, normally in order to have crop insurance for growing corn, you have to be able to plant it in the ground before Memorial Day. That way there's 100 days of sunlight for your crop to be able to grow, whether if that's corn. And what we're kind of seeing in the Mississippi River area of the Midwest of the U.S. is, that 100-day mark is Memorial Day, which is today and tomorrow. So a lot of corn farmers, because this, a fairly wet spring, a lot of the farmers haven't yet planted their crops, 100-day crops. So we're starting to see some talk about, okay, well, rather than growing corn, they're going to potentially have to grow soybeans, because soybeans have slightly shorter growing cycles. But the current trade wars with Asia is kind of causing issues with tariffs as well as value of soybeans. So it'd be great if farmers in the Midwest had a 50 to 70-day crop that they could plant instead of corn, grow it hopefully more sustainably, and still be able to pull off a harvest this year. Because it looks like, knock on wood, yeah, and then we're starting to see that happen in a lot of states. Industrial hemp is kind of slowly making its progress across the U.S. I think there's 4 states that don't have industrial hemp or cannabis laws, and the vast majority of Americans, as well as people in North America, are in jurisdictions where they can cultivate either medical marijuana, medical cannabis, industrial hemp, or cannabis. So I want to know how Josh and Kelly, how's it up in where your part of the world? How's your spring been? I saw some pictures of you guys' greenhouses.
Yeah.
Well, we just probably about 2.5, maybe 2 weeks ago, we just got done with some super cold evenings. So had a really hard frost. It seemed like spring went from really, really cold, super hard frost to really hot, to like almost like 30-degree days. So we've had to transplant all of our starts over and over again, not necessarily with our cannabis at all, but like our chard and our beets. They didn't really like that super hot temperatures. Our brassicas, we had to replant twice. But everything's coming up now, and now we're feeling like a true spring.
It's been really dry, actually. I mean, it's wet right now, because it just rained the last couple of days, which is sweet, but it's been extremely dry, unbelievably so, to where you're walking around in the forest and it's really pretty brittle. So that was interesting. It's been good for the ganja starts. We got a bunch of seeds started on April 20th, 420, and they're coming up really nice, really beautiful right now. All of our soils are totally prepped. All of our greenhouses are totally prepped, and we're really excited for the year. Right now we got auto flowers we're going to try this year. We got a bunch of hemp, a bunch of cultivars that are growing in Canada, but have been, have come from wherever they've come from to grow. So we're going to try that out. We're also going to test whether they finish up here in British Columbia, because a lot of the hemp strains haven't finished. All of the Auto 1, the Auto 2, the Cherry Wine, the Box, the Spectrum, all of those really didn't finish good in our area and couldn't be in the field right now.
So we're feeling really blessed. We got like a really long breeding project, maybe like a 40-year breeding project from Heart Rock. And those guys gave us some auto flower. So we're going to be able to do some crossing, and really our big goal this year, and probably the next 5 years, is coming out with a super high CBD hemp strain that finishes up here in Canada. So we're really, really focused on that. That's what we're going to be working on.
Yeah, it's also, something we're working on as a collective and as a pure certified group. A lot of us farmers were doing a breeding project together, and we're interested in genetics and public domain and what that means, and what are the rights within public domain, what rights are we giving up and stuff like that. So that's something we're really exploring, and we're talking to people inside the cannabis realm. We're talking to people outside the cannabis realm that are in the food realms, because food has been hijacked, long ago, in ways that cannabis might be just facing now. And I think part of legalization that we really always feared was really this right now, was the federal takeover, and what large agriculture does with crops is something that we really don't want to see in the cannabis industry. So it's putting a huge challenge to us right now, and we are excited. You're not excited, but we are excited, but interested in just talking about it more and finding out.
And for us, I personally, I've been a really long time friend of Mowgli, and Mowgli's, family is good friends of mine. So there's a personal relationship there as well. And I personally want to thank Phylos right now for opening up our eyes to a lot of things. A lot of people in the industry have been asleep, and they haven't recognized that we needed to protect this IP, or that we needed to share these seeds. We're, like Josh said, we're really into public domain. We're reaching out to every single expert that we know of, anybody that can mentor us. So it really sparked a fire under our booties at this time to really get going. And what we came up with was that we're going to be putting it in the public domain. We've already starting a breeding project with 40+ farms and the pure certification. We've got a whole bunch of data that people can collect that we keep within ourselves. And then that actualizes your seeds. The thing that we worry about patenting and marketing and all these things in the cannabis plant is she's an adaptogen. She's going to adapt. So it's really interesting. There's a whole lot of money in corporate cannabis and people that are dumping into this sort of patenting idea in cannabis, but she's an adaptogen. So I could take a patent seed and somebody could spend $2 million on patenting that seed and get all of the rights and everything to it. And then I could put it in my deep, beautiful living soil beds for 4 years and you wouldn't even recognize it, because she's an adaptogen. So I'm just,
I guess we're kind of putting it out there. Wouldn't cannabis already have been genetically modified back in the 30s or the 40s when they made the crossover from hemp to cotton, or from hemp to something else? What is someone's thought on that? What, maybe it's
All
not really
cannabis
actually
is
possible.
genetically modified, but not genetically engineered.
but it hasn't been
input-
successful enough, or what?
No, dating back thousands of years, just due to Mendelian breeding, cannabis has been bred from a dioecious plant, which in the industry will call hermaphroditic, into monoecious plants. And that was all based on selective breeding. So,
But that's not genetic modification. That's the difference.
it's
That's
genetic
selection.
Yeah, it's selection and for genetic modification, but it's not genetic engineering. So we're not actually creating genetically modified organism, GMO, but just due to Mendelian genetics, the simple act of doing a analytical test to select for CBD, and then taking the CBD cultivars to incorporate into your breeding pollen is a form of genetic modification. Now, I personally am a big fan. My educational background's on molecular biogenetics. So, before getting into the industry, I was looking at, developing biofuels for use, because, biofuels are far more sustainable than the other sources of energy. But ultimately, we don't want to pull the wool over our eyes and say that cannabis is the same cannabis that was around, 10,000, 50,000 years ago. We have numerous different land races that locally adapted to their growing regions. And the simple act of taking those, genetics from one part of the world to another part of the world, cultivating them for successive generations, you're going to get adaptation of those hybrids or those cultivars to your bioregion. And that's a form of, selecting for cultivars and, Mendelian genetic selection.
And that's the case for all plants on Earth. I mean, there's, that's the case for walnut trees and
Any kind of food and herbaceous plant.
Everything is in constant evolution. So
yeah, now there's a big difference between, I could go in depth into, the concerns that I have about genetic engineering. The last thing we want to do is to start, inserting gene sequences into cannabis cultivars that make them, produce antifreeze or produce pesticide resistance, or there's even ways that you can make them phosphorescent, so glow in black lights or glow in lights. You could genetically engineer it, inserting rose thorns, so you have rose thorns. There's even genetic selection that's going on for actually hybridizing different traits from non-cannabis varieties into cannabis varieties. And those genetic engineering where you're taking non-cannabis genetics and putting them into cannabis potentially have side effects. We don't know, with big cases in corn, they've not only created pesticide resistance so that they can spray really bad pesticides onto cornfields. That's really bad for the ecosystem, but they've genetically engineered corn so that it can resist that. Now, I think that is a travesty to the ecosystem, and part of starting this new industry, we're going to be able to promote avoiding that sort of thing by developing sustainable ecosystems.
Why would you genetically modify it to be resistant to a pesticide instead of genetically modify it to be resistant against the bug?
Yeah, totally.
In the first place,
and
cut out the pesticides.
Yeah, so being able to select for cultivars that grow well in your bioregion, the strains that grow well in Florida are going to be more equatorial sativas with narrow leaves versus the ones that grow well in the mountain areas or in different Appalachias. So I'm a big fan of being able to incorporate a sustainable ecosystem, because every bad thing that could potentially affect our crop has a natural predator. The last thing we want to do is start inserting genetics into cannabis that could potentially have adverse side effects. Good example I've seen, frost resistant genetic engineering, where they're taking genes that produce antifreeze in Arctic fish and putting those into plant cultivars.
How do you feel about feminized seed then? I mean, on that note, all the farmers using feminized seed on a large scale in hemp agriculture, does that raise a flag to you?
Yes and no. So I don't consider myself a breeder by any means, but there are for every tool there's a use, right? If I'm going to plant several hundred or several thousand acres, the farmers that are
Take it easy.
the farmers that are growing hundreds or thousands of acres don't have the time or money or resources to be able to go through those and select for the dioecious or hermaphroditic plants. So in some cases we need those feminized seeds. But as a home grower, you're probably not going to find me cultivating feminized seeds, because the male plants are the basis of breeding projects. So being able to select for good females, good males, doing that hybridization, and then in the case of feminized seeds, the commercial breeders can then develop feminized seed, release them in mass to farmers, and hopefully have any given farmer will grow a few cultivars interplanted. And it's a good way to be able to create a farm that not only has industrial hemp that's primarily feminized with a lower risk of cross pollination, but then the farmer can spend his time doing other things like trying to interplant, trying to get cover crops going between the hemp plants. And so I think there's pros and cons with everything. It's a lot of people hate on strains that produce hermaphroditic traits, but that's really just the plant doing what it evolved to do thousands of years ago. So you won't see me growing feminized plants, but I may incorporate feminized plants into some of the breeding projects. I think that the bigger concern is when I see people selling feminized seed, and part of the material transfer agreements include that you're not allowed to replant them, you're not allowed to hybridize them, you're not allowed to collect the seeds, and there are fairly large, well-known seed distributors that aren't allowing breeders to breed with their stock. And
Which isn't that cool?
that's not cool, no, because many cases they're incorporating genetics that they acquired on the open market.
Exactly.
And doing the work to be able to hybridize and stabilize those strains, and then preventing other people from hybridizing and stabilizing those strains. So there's pros and cons, but what we want to be able to do is we understand that there is a ton of money and ton of work incorporated into developing new lines, and we want those breeders to be able to protect those lines. But at the same time, we don't want that to, cannonball to a point where, just because I'm doing work on genetics for my farm doesn't mean that, if that seed or pollen gets out into other people's farm, then you have potential litigation where, dude down the street or over the hill accidentally got pollinated. And we've actually seen Monsanto Bayer do that, where the BT resistant to pesticide resistant corn got cross pollinated, just due to corn being a aerial pollination species, and then those large companies going after other companies. So I have mixed feeling about what some of the genetics companies have done. I'm a big fan of being able to do genetic testing because I think that that's going to start developing intellectual property rights for the breeders. But in the same hand, we want to be able to have a open transparency, and I think it's a huge conflict of interest for if I was running a testing lab and all of a sudden I opened up a extraction lab or a farm, there's a potential conflict of interest. It's the same as if you're doing a genetic testing lab and then start opening up a genetic distribution company. So I think that once you commit to doing that genetic testing lab, you have to kind of keep that as your wheelhouse, because then you're going to be the one that's helping to develop intellectual property rights for those breeders. And I've spent tens of thousands of dollars through companies on doing genetic research, getting stuff sequenced, searching for rare phenotypes in the genetic sequence. And it's a concern of mine that, some of those genetics, I don't think that any of those genetics were stolen, but I do think that some of that data should be available in the public art, and as well as should be, proprietary. Because if I find a end-all be-all genetic mutation that produces entirely CBDV or CBGV or some of the other rare cannabinoids, obviously we want to protect those, develop those, and then as part of raising money to become a business, being able to sell them. But the last thing I want to see is people like Coltyn not being able to have access. People like myself, and I left Texas to be able to move to Colorado 15 years ago just so I could have access to medicine. And I consider it a travesty that we have almost 100 years of prohibition preventing stuff from being available.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great points there. Feminized seed to cull that many plants on an per acre basis is a tremendous amount of infrastructure, and to be able to start non-feminized seed takes tremendous amount of infrastructure. And when you're a farmer, you don't have a tremendous amount of infrastructure always set aside for individual crops. It's mainly a catch-all. So it's extremely difficult when you get into large acreage to be able to manage that. It's something I've had to deal with. It's something that I'm continually having to deal with. And
what's large acreage to you, just for the listeners?
Sure. Large acres is over 40 acres. I think that's large. That starts to become something that requires management in a much larger scale than you can do individually. It requires equipment that's much larger than yourself. It can be done by humans, but it's a tremendous amount of work. So that's 40 acres and up, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of acres. So
of cannabis?
So of hemp. So yes, cannabis sativa L. So I just think it's really hard to manage that when you're culling things, and it requires such infrastructure to start your progeny, your genetics so early, to be able to select for that and then put them out at the right time so they actually don't get too big. And then there's the management of the canopy in itself. And it's why in the East Coast we don't plant until the second week of June, because our plants just get too big. We can't manage it. So that's something I see firsthand, and as we learn about this, I always consider cannabis to be an ornamental that we're attempting to industrialize. And there's a lot of things that we have to understand before we can attempt to start, like you said before, start taking away things from the gene pool or adding things to the gene pool. So those are major concerns. And to bring it back into the Phylos scope, I've worked with Phylos personally, and like yourself, Kelly, I really am fond of the people over there and what they've opened my eyes up to. It is a very scary thing to me, what is happening amongst the industry and the world at large in terms of genetics. However, I do think that there's several ways that we can attempt to protect ourselves and protect the legacies that have gone before us. And the preservation aspect is extremely important. And we're all just trying to make sense of it. And I think, and not many people truly understand what is actually truly happening around.
And I just wanted
to your point.
Yeah, I just wanted to just say that although, Magley's been a good friend of mine for a long time, what I didn't say is that what happened and the rock, and the shaking that it did within the industry, is absolutely not okay.
And it was deceiving, and it wasn't what they started out as, and it's not a way to move forward, and it's not a way to build trust. And that's why we're thankful, because it's like, hey, check it out. Corporations are here, and it's for real, and you can lose some shit. How you doing, Beth?
Yeah, and I just wanted to just to continue that. I worked with them, submitted 24 samples of my own personal work. It was not on the pretense that they were going to open up their own program. And my heart dropped when I got the call. I knew about that 6 months before they did the announcement, and my heart was broken. I mean, this is something that I've done since I was 14 years old. You take away a license, you take away this whole industry, I still do this. And it's something that deeply, profoundly hurt me on a deeper level than just a business move. So I just want to point that out, that it isn't okay. I don't know how we move forward, honestly. I'm trying to make sense of that, and I just want to be really open to that. If Mowgli and the team's listening, Alicia, I would really like to figure out a way to understand more about what you believe that you can do for us, but I really don't see it. I just don't. So, I'd love for them to come on the show, Marcus, if you can have that. And I really love a lot more transparency to the general community, and not saying that, since all this has happened, you haven't attempted to do all of that, but we've got to make this right somehow. Because I did carry your name.
It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to have a conversation about it. Even now, while we have this conversation, there's people in the chat room who are claiming we're fully censoring everything. It's like, oh, it's a big conspiracy. We're all a part of this conspiracy. It's like, man, listen, like, everyone thought it was a great thing in the beginning, and maybe some things kind of bounced and bumped, and now that people are feeling a little, for me, I still acknowledge that it's confusing to me, because I hear a lot of what people are upset about is not really possible or happening. It's like this made up Instagram thing that's not even based in reality. It's like they're taking old material and they're taking the genetics out and they're creating new plants. It's like, no, they're not. Like, that's absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like, at least get your shit right if you're going to attack a company. If they did shady shit, great, let's talk about the shady shit they did. But to just to create this other alternative reality doesn't help the situation. So I'm down for having the conversation. At the same time, I'm also down for welcoming Coltyn and Wendy to the room, the Turners, as the world Turners. I like that very much. Good to see you guys. And also to welcome Joshua in the room, to welcome Johnny B into the room, and to welcome Beth, who just rolled into the room, who may know a lot more about this than maybe some of you think that you know. So I don't know who wants to talk next. I want to talk to all of you, but I maybe Beth, you might want to chime in and tell everyone who you are and how you fit into this situation.
Sure. And also, I just want to say thank you so much for having me this morning. Good morning, everybody. Hi. I am the executive director.
Are you muted, Beth? We can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
I hear Beth.
I hear Beth.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Does anyone not hear Beth other than Josh and Kelly? Did everyone else hear Beth? Hello? Okay, I think you're good. They'll have to figure it out.
Oh
You're
no. Well,
It'll be recorded.
I want for Josh and Kelly to hear everything I have to say. So, I hope that they fix the thing. So I'm the executive director of the Open Cannabis Project, which is closing on Friday. And I'm here to join the conversation, to support and answer questions. And like Steve and I kind of talked about yesterday, I think that, part of what has been, I mean, at this point, like, I think everyone knows the story. I've spoken to the press. My story is out there. People can read it. And I think that now I'm in a place of really being ready to, well, one, make space for grieving and processing and all that stuff. Two, to make space for, really defining, like, okay, if an ethical boundary has been crossed, which it has, then we need to define as a community what our ethics are, so that we can better, define what it is that we stand for, and hold that space. And then thirdly, I think that I'm ready to just be in a place of moving forward and finding solutions, and to do so in a respectful manner. And this has been really, I missed the early part of the call, but, I heard Kelly mention, that Mowgli is a friend, and Mowgli is a friend of mine too. Like, my heart hurts for my friend and for our damaged friendship right now. And I think that, I want to see amends made on all sides, and I want to find solutions, and that's what I'm here to talk about. And I'm really grateful to have the space and hear what people have to say and all of that.
I've got a question for Wade. I have had the honor of cultivating Harlequin for a little bit over 10 years. And, that was one of the strains that not only saved my life, but saved multiple other children's lives around me. And I've done my best to try and spread those CBD genetics to as many patients as possible. But obviously, we're starting to see some of those genetics now getting incorporated into lines that are being trying to be protected. So, taking it back, we obviously want to be able to have strains openly available, but, how do we develop lines, make them publicly available, not only to the patients, but to breeders to work with? And then obviously, let's bring it back to Beth and see how can we not only, preserve genetics in the prior art, but also be able to develop those genetics into potential, intellectual property for the companies?
Great question. Wish I had an answer. If you look at the model of Harlequin,
and also it looks like the THCV was found in the Harlequin as well, which is super interesting.
The easiest way.
Go ahead, Sam.
Hello?
Just like they do.
Oh, I can't hear anyone.
If anyone doesn't have their mic muted, we won't hear Sam. He's only going to come in clear if everyone not talking has their microphone muted. Otherwise, he's going to come in choppy like that.
I'm not hearing him at all.
No, now he's stopped talking completely.
Well, I'll try and answer your question. I love that idea that cannabis is incredibly elastic and able to give us whatever we're looking for if we're willing to go looking for it. So, if you look at what happened with Harlequin,
but nod your heads if you're hearing. No, I.
Don't just have one sentence.
I hear you guys, Josh and Kelly.
Oh, okay.
I heard that. What just happened? Oh my goodness. You know what? I want to take a pause, and I want to get back to this conversation because it's very important. But I want to hear from Wendy and Coltyn as well, because we haven't heard from them in a long time. And Wendy said she had some news she wanted to share with us, and I always like to hear from those guys. So we're just going to take a little pause. We've got lots more to talk about in regards to Phylos, but let's hear from the Turners. How is the world turning for the Turners? Oh no. Oh no, now their microphones aren't working. Do you guys hear them? Oh
No.
my goodness. Oh, let me see if I can fix this somehow, some way. Let's see. Turners. Oh man, today's been quite a lot of technical difficulties. Let's try now. No. I don't get it. You guys might have to come back in. I'm so sorry. This is so strange. Didn't we hear them when they first came in? I find that if you're, I don't know if you're on a Mac, but I have found that, reconnect and maybe try Chrome. It's the Google. It works best with Google chat. So yeah, nobody's here, and they're going to come back. I do want to hear from them. I don't want them to, have to wait around for hours while we discuss Phylos, because we can go back and have more of a discussion. And I want to hear, there's people going off in the chat room. They want to hear about, obviously Rob and Sam's, part in Phylos in the beginning. They were two of the first people that brought it to my attention for sure. And so we want to hear from them. Let's see if we hear you guys now. No. Oh my goodness. I hate when this stuff happens. This is like the last time I basically stopped doing Hash Church because I couldn't hear anyone. But it's not just me that's not hearing right now.
So we recycled our page and just refreshed it, and that helped us, and maybe someone else can do that. And we'll see how that goes.
You just refreshed your thing and you got it going. Yeah. And what did you say, Sam?
I unplugged my microphone.
I mean, I'll just, maybe if anyone can hear us.
We can hear you. I can hear you perfect.
I feel like it's large corporations act differently than the common person on the street, and it's not to say that corporations are bad, because a lot of us have corporations and we can do a lot of good with them. And there's even B Corp and B corporations, which are really awesome and allow you to take, foundation money tax free. And that's really important. But I think with people like Phylos and different companies and even other big distribution companies that are out there, you just start getting investment and you start getting millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And then it's nearly impossible for you to keep an authentic, true, rightful vision when you have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in, because the energy just shifts and it takes it away from the original mission. And I think that's what we're seeing on so many fronts. Here in Canada, farms are either having to join a large corporation or be incredibly savvy on their own to be independent of that. So I think that is a big part of the problem.
And right now we're having discussions on, what we were talking about earlier with acreage and how big can a farm, scale and still be regenerative. And it goes into the same notion of how big can a corporation scale and still be regenerative. How can we create systems really that are brand new to us? We've seen really small businesses go to big, massive corporations, and how can we blend those so that people are still having a say in it as well, and that the rules and the regulations are for the people. And I think that cannabis is really giving us this new voice, or this new idea to, how are we going to tackle these things? And I'm really thankful for that. So it's opened our eyes to a lot of different things.
And
corporate
maybe some
social responsibility. So I'll introduce a term that everyone should be using: corporate social responsibility. As independent growers are becoming companies, and then they transition into publicly traded companies, they have a responsibility to their shareholders. But part of that responsibility to the shareholders can include corporate social responsibility. So since we are the people that are, everybody who's watching this, everybody who is on this call has, we're creating an industry, and part of that industry, we have the opportunity to create good corporate social responsibility. And that comes down to the decisions that we make. Do we cultivate using pesticides? Do we cultivate regeneratively? Do we extract using sustainable methods or non-sustainable methods? And while there's plenty of money to be made, while the price of cannabis is artificially inflated due to regulation, as we transition into a commodity crop, I'm a firm believer that a lot of the people that are not cultivating sustainably aren't going to be able to compete, because we can produce acres as cheaply as you can home grow, and even cheaper. You can if you're cultivating using cover crops, you don't have to pay for as many nutrients, and that makes it far more sustainable. But when it comes to developing IP, companies that are developing intellectual property have a responsibility to be able to make those products available to as many people as possible. And what part of the reason why I consider it such an honor to be that Mark and everyone has kind of hopped on the church train is because we've been able to disseminate some of this prior art to the public, while at the same time promoting good corporate social responsibility. So
well put, Mike. Thank you for sharing that. Any word from Coltyn and Wendy's microphone? Is there any sound over there? No. Oh, that hurts me, you guys. That hurts me. Can't even tell you. I just want to hear from them so badly, but it's just like not in the books. I guess we're going to have to figure you guys out. Maybe turn that computer completely off, restart the whole thing, turn it off, turn it on. Don't do a restart. Do a turn off and a turn on.
Hey, Josh, I think Josh is on this call. Josh, why don't you talk about this class you got coming up here next month and how people can learn how to cultivate more sustainably?
Perfect.
How's it going, dude?
Dude.
Sorry, my battery died.
Out in the farm, eh?
Yeah. I'll see if I can't unplug because my battery died, but I'm transplanting these clones.
Of course you are.
These seedlings. And it was cool that Sam is on, because I remember hearing on a hash church maybe about this time last year, he was talking to Eric.
The gem.
About this gem, and so I'm using this tool, so I'm behind, and so I'm transplanting into 4 inches so I can put these seedlings in the dark for 24 hours and then bring them back outside, and in 2 weeks down the road they'll show the sex, and so I can call my males from there. And so pretty cool tech. I appreciate that. But yeah, so you're talking about the aquaponics course we're doing here in a couple of weeks. Yeah, Steve, Steve and I'm really excited. I've never hosted people on my farm, so I'm a little bit nervous about it. It's kind of feels like I'm getting down into my underwear or something and showing my really special spot. It's just my spot. So, but I'm really excited, and we're gonna basically just kind of share everything that we have. It'll be really, because it's on my farm, I can walk through, how I do my seeds, how I do my clones, my whole process. And so, and then of course it's aquaponics focused, and we're gonna build a system here on my farm. I've already got the reservoir dug, and it'll be just a way that folks can walk away and say, this is how I can simply build a commercial scale, 8-foot wide aquaponic bed that'll be 100 feet long, and you can scale from there. So
great information to be sharing. I mean, I'm sure that people will get a lot out of it. I know that from going to your last conference there that you did, it was just, it was simultaneous to Lift, which was very unique in the sense that I just saw them as both like parts that need to like fit into one another, like so much of Lift had no idea what was going on at your conference, and so much of what was going on at your conference was everything that was missing from the Lift conference. And everything those people needed, I just thought, oh my God, like if only these motherfuckers realize, like they just need to walk 2 blocks down the street and all of their consultants, all of their, like, they're just sitting right there, the people that they need. And it's just, you know, I think that with humans, we just only know how to divide. And it's just so much like, I'm really, as I get older, all about this quiver idea and concept of having many arrows in my quiver rather than a single arrow in my quiver. You know, like from an extraction standpoint, being a part of a company that has 7 different types of extraction, including solvent extractions, that has never been my interest or focus whatsoever. But I did get to the point where I realized that my opinion is maybe smaller than the opinions of the masses and what they want to have access to. People want to have access to everything. They don't want just one or the other, you know, although they make it seem like that when they put a fence down the middle and sort of pick one or the other. You just, it's
hard. It's a hard thing, man. It truly is, because like what everyone's been talking about is there's this part of us that's lost. And like, I personally want to see, you know, the world be full of small farmers. You know, I think that would change the world in a better way, 100%. But, you know, and this is where I guess you would never hear the 14-year-old me saying this this part, you know, what we have is a large agricultural system, and to take advantage of it and to be able to hop into it and change it from within is the opportunity we have with hemp right now. And I'm just kind of realizing that in myself right now, with actually just getting to meet some folks from the conference. Tara Lee, who hops on all the time, her and her husband, they service, you know, Big Ag in Washington, and all the hemp farmers, they sell fittings and sprayers and tanks. And they explained to me that folks will set up these nutrient yards, you know, will be a 2, 3, 5 acre facility, and they'll be making big nute tanks, and these semis will come in and feed off these nute tanks and then go out and you know, apply to the fields. And her thought was like, why don't you and Leighton do that with your compost tea? And why don't you grow hemp in, you know, in Eastern Washington? And I was just like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But as I've gotten involved in hemp in the last couple of weeks, I planted 1,300 seeds last night. I'm actually applied for my permit, and I'm doing hemp up here on my property, and I'm really stoked on it. I'm kind of just figuring it out, and I'm realizing that that's a huge way to make an impact. And so we're talking about kind of partnering together, and I'm going to, you know, grow the seed that we can then use to sell to farmers and kind of get them on a different path. You know, you want to start on a new crop, and here's a way that we can help facilitate building up your soil, you know, in the same token. So I feel both sides of it, honestly. You know, it's the world we live in some respects.
Well, cannabis is unique in the sense that it's been in the shadows, it's been in the closets, it's been in the basement, and it has this like attachment to it unlike anything else I've ever seen, where there's this real like I think it teaches people compassion and empathy, and they're rooted in those experiences with cannabis, and then they can't remove it, even though they're also like, it's removed them from this prison of being a slave to a monetary system. Usually at a young age, you figure out like, holy shit, like if I bring like a couple of ounces of this shit, like all my friends will buy it, and then they've got friends that will buy it, and you figure out pretty early on that you can make money selling cannabis. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, you know, I definitely think cannabis is special in that respect, for sure. Kelly talks about it a lot, and you know, but I believe all plants really have that in them. And I've been listening to like the regenerative agriculture podcast with this John Kemp guy, and he's got these old school farmers on there that are converting over to regenerative style. And I'm so damn impressed, you know, because at the heart of it, all these farmers, even the guys that are using chemicals, they really love the earth. You know,
yeah,
farmers are pressed. They can't make money. They're pressed, and they're making bad decisions. And like, dude, if you can show them the right way, they're all about it. You know, in this podcast, I just want to shout it out because it just showed me how you know, these old farmers, they're converting over. It's changing their lives and the way they look at agriculture and the way they look at their own happiness, you know, and well-being. It's really powerful. So,
you know what, I feel the police are having the same revelation with enforcing cannabis laws. As these cannabis laws deteriorate, it's much the same thing, where they're just like, any cop can tell you, like, obviously people who use cannabis do not cause us any problems. Like you ask any cop or anyone that works at 911, they'll tell you like alcohol is a big problem, you know, like gangs are a problem, there's drunk driving, but like people just using cannabis, not a problem.
Yeah, and the farming's a way of life as well, you know, so it's very
And they're
much
better
connected.
drivers, as we've found out, you know, through studies, which I think is very awesome, to take some hits and go on a nice little drive. Oh wait!
Did you say that?
What I meant to say is, you know,
there are children in the room.
A walk.
To be tested here in Canada, now be careful.
1 second.
But you know, I think it's partly our responsibility. That way we feel about, you know, just growing, you know, in a way that's better for the earth. It's just like, you know, we're even big, large agriculture, whatever, everyone's gotten sick at one point, and we've talked about this before, or, you know, they see some kind of degradation. And so I just think it's important for us to do our best to regenerate life on Earth. So, you know, people say, you know, what is regenerative farming? Regenerative farming is soil that's better at the end of the year than when it started. Or you've planted more new things on your property every year, and that's a good start.
And earlier, you know, you all were talking about that it's great, you know, people want different choices. Well, I think that if people are educated on the choices that they're given, they're going to definitely choose, you know, the earth, and they're going to choose something healthy, and they're going to choose something that makes them feel good, and they're going to choose something that is socially responsible, because I think innately people really want to make the right decisions, but unfortunately there's such a vast amount of bad information and marketing and look over here and shiny flossy, you know, that is just really leading, you know, more money and greed. And I think that we have a social responsibility as cannabis farmers right now, because we're here having this conversation, that we need to educate our patients, we need to educate our consumers and give them the choice on, you know, what it is that they can have. And I feel like that's really important in moving in the future.
Yeah, creating a new system, a different system, one, you know, like the Swedish schoolgirl there, Greta Thunberg. I'm sure you guys have seen her speak. She's really inspirational. She's like went in front of the UN and was talking about climate change and telling the adults they weren't responsible enough, and that, you know, that they were like, we're going to take this over now. And she basically said, when there are no solutions to find in your system, then it's time for a new system. You know, like you don't, like, she's 15 years old. Like, if you haven't seen her before, Greta Thunberg, Google her up and check out her whipping that she gave to the UN address there. It kind of reminded me of David Suzuki's daughter, who also did a pretty good one back in the 80s. If you haven't seen that one, where she also just like lays into the United Nations. It's pretty inspirational. But yeah, Greta Thunberg, if you've never heard of her.
Albert Einstein also says that when you've run out of solution, you've lost your creativity.
There you go. Interesting. We still can't hear the Turners. Is this like going to be the torture of my day?
Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Oh my God, that was awesome.
Sorry. I don't know what was going on. Normally it works just perfectly. So
well, you guys are a patient lot, and we do appreciate you spending time with us on this Sunday of afternoons. How is everything going?
Crazy.
I bet.
Yeah. I actually just started my own foundation called the Coltyn Turner Foundation.
Nice.
We are going to be raising funds to fund research into the medical benefits of cannabis.
Dude, that is so amazing. That is perfect for you guys to be doing. You're the perfect face for such a foundation. And I'm definitely going to go out of my way and bend over backwards to help raise funds for your foundation.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's really important to us. We have found that every time we go to a doctor with Coltyn, that they say, oh, there's no evidence that cannabis works. And I'm like, right here. Here's your evidence right here. You know, I don't know how much more blatant you can get than Coltyn Turner's colon, you know?
And even more so than that, the words of a mother who was going through losing a son and then have it turn around. And like, how do you not just put, like, we all have mothers. We all have nothing but respect for our mothers. It's like, if the mom says so, then it shall be so.
It shall be so. Gosh,
Like,
dang it, I say so.
How is that not proof enough?
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, these doctors, this is the challenge that we have, is that these doctors don't listen. They don't care.
Right.
They have their own mindset. They have their own agendas. And, you know, Coltyn sat in the hospital for 31 days just recently because he had an ulcer in his stomach, or in his duodenum. And they kept saying, oh, no, it's his Crohn's. It's his Crohn's. It's his Crohn's. And we're like, no, it's not his Crohn's. And they were like, yeah, but it is, but it is, but it is. And I'm like, but it isn't. I'm like, why are you not listening to us? So one of the things one of the reasons why they don't want to listen is because we were cannabis patients, or that he's a cannabis patient, and that we don't have the evidence, the clinical proof that cannabis actually works in the United States. Now, there is tons of studies across the world, Israel, Spain, Canada, that are coming out with some major awesome evidence that cannabis works for a multitude of situations. But here in the US, the doctors are still, you know, it's not FDA approved, it's federally illegal still, it's a Schedule 1, blah blah blah. We've all heard the bullshit, and we're tired of it. So we want to create a foundation for, by the time it becomes available to test, to have these FDA approvals, to make sure that, like, when you guys are talking about genetics, it's so important, because I don't know why it works in Coltyn, and I don't know if it's a specific cannabinoid, if it's a specific genetic, if it's a specific strain, but we've had to go through all of this craziness to try to figure it out. And you know, we need more evidence, we need more research, we need more people like you guys doing the work. And you can't really do the work when you're trying to run a business too. So we're hoping that this foundation is going to allow people, farmers, cultivators, MIPS people, you know, product inventors, to have the money to do extra research on patients, to make sure that what their product is actually working for patients.
It's so crazy that it's this, once again, this division where you have this sort of like, oh, we want to do things organically and regeneratively. And they're like, no, we're going to do it with salts and we're going to do it monster style. And then you have the same thing happening with you guys, where you're like, you guys kind of are the representation of the organic farmer being listened by big ads played up by the doctors. And they're just like, no, it's his Crohn's. We know. We went to school for quite a while. It's fine, Mrs. Turner. We'll get to you here in a second. It's just unbelievable that why don't we have a system that engages the people in a different way, like that uses both Eastern and Western medicine, but also engages the patient as part of this experience, rather than just being talked to like, you know, you're a wall, but being like, listen to what I have to say. Like, it's really important. What we tell you is going to help you diagnose what's going on here, because you're not with us 24/7 and we are. You know, like, how can you not listen to that?
I don't know. I honestly, that is the question of the millennium. I don't know why patients aren't listened to. I see it every single day on Facebook in all of these groups that we're involved in. My doctor doesn't listen. My doctor said it was this. My doctor said that Solara wasn't giving me those side effects. We hear it every single day, and then well, you know, they don't want to listen to the cannabis situation. You know, they don't want to say that cannabis actually does help with inflammation. They don't want to say that it can actually fix Crohn's or cancer or any of these
No, they can't believe it. They want to deny that reality. They're like, I deny that reality and replace it with an artificial version of my own.
Exactly. And I don't know if it's because of the big pharma. You know, they're getting a lot of money from these pharmaceutical companies. Sure. And they're not making a lot of money, kickbacks from the cannabis industry. So is that the reason why? We don't know.
I think that most doctors are good though and want to do well, and their Hippocratic oath is that they shall do no harm. Like they must be so cognitively dissonant to what is going on and have convinced themselves, no, this is fine. I've met great doctors. I know there are great healers. They're healers. They're people that want to help heal people, but they've somehow gone down this road where, I think it's part of the schooling and the teaching. It's very much like once again, to use the metaphor, it's not very regenerative, the way they learn about medicine and the way they go about healing in Western medicine, at least, that it's not accepting of cannabis. I mean, they've never been taught about the endocannabinoid system. Can you imagine being a doctor and not having been taught about an entire system? Like, imagine them not being taught about the central nervous system or the immune system.
When we try,
I've worked with so many doctors over in third world countries, and I've helped set up clinics, and then we have to recruit doctors from all different parts of the world for them to come over and work in our little small clinics that don't have a lot of machines that go bing and don't have, a lot of that stuff. So they have to be required to use their hands and to use their intuition. And in working in a clinic where, there's obstetricians that come from all over the world and they're the best in their field, but when they don't have their Doppler, their machines, they don't actually know how to work with patients. And they actually feel ripped off. They feel as if they, went into a system where they wanted to become a healer and they didn't really get that information. So unfortunately, here we go back to what you all were talking about earlier, is we're set up within a system that's totally broken. And there's something about humanity that continues to set up systems that we can't actually work within. And I don't know what, that issue is. That's something really large and existential, and we could go on for hours and hours. But going back to doctors, they are not getting the proper education. Their education is through pharmaceuticals. They can't tell you about curative. They can just tell you what pharmaceutical works. And I think that that's incredibly unfortunate. And I blame that on the system yet again.
And I think that a lot of it is because we live in such a society that is instant gratification. And they just don't want to take the time anymore. Coltyn sat in the hospital for 31 days, and 31 days they did nothing, but he was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I was like, what are you going to do? You're telling me the same thing over and over and over again, but you're wrong, and you're not listening to us. And I didn't understand why that kept going. Other than, finally one of the doctors come in and said, well, why aren't you giving him his cannabis? And I'm like, I can't. He doesn't have a card in the state of Illinois anymore. And she was like, I'd try to find some anyway. If that's what works for him, then freaking do it. And then finally we were just like, then give us some medicine till we can get out of this place. And we get him out of the hospital, and here it goes, we give him extra cannabis, double his dose, and he's fine again, and all of a sudden everything is gone, and he's back to normal, and he's gaining weight. He's gained like 30 pounds, and the doctors just wanted that instant gratification, or they wanted to do the surgery so they could have that $50,000. And for whatever reason, I know that there are patients out there that have great doctors, and I know that there are great doctors out there, but I just don't think that they understand the plant as much as what we do and what you guys do. And I think that that's where the disconnect is. I think that we as cannabis, the cannabis community, really need to get into educating about genetics and about how things work in our bodies with the cannabis plant. I think that's the biggest disconnect.
Yeah, and you're going to start to see, doing FDA trials in order to create cannabinoid pharmaceuticals is fairly expensive. And in a black market or unregulated market, it's difficult to raise money to fund that sort of research. What I liken it to is, we have a couple of cannabinoid pharmaceuticals that have been FDA approved. And, when I have a couple family members that are doctors, and while they see the potential medical benefit in cannabis, their Hippocratic oath, do no harm, prevents them from suggesting or recommending herbal supplement cannabis or nutraceutical cannabis. They're obliged to only provide pharmaceutically approved drugs because they're concerned those pharmaceutically approved drugs have gone through multiple tiers of FDA review in order to assure that there's no potential side effects or minimize the potential side effects. Now, as the industry starts rolling, you see wider acceptance, you're going to start to see more of those cannabinoid pharmaceuticals. But what we're really seeing in the CBD realm is broad acceptance as well as broad deployment of cannabinoid herbal supplements and nutraceuticals. Now, a herbal supplement is going to be regulated differently than a nutraceutical or a pharmaceutical, but we as patients need all three. The pharmaceuticals are necessary in order to get them listed on insurance, prescribed by doctors under doctor supervision. But taking drugs through FDA trials in order to make a pharmaceutical grading takes millions of dollars, takes years of trials that have to be supervised. And in the US, it's incredibly difficult. My lab in Illinois applied to supply NIDA 3 or 4 years ago now. NIDA has yet to review any of the applications. There's currently one supplier for the company, and we're talking about a company in Illinois that has billions of dollars of resources, already affiliated with multiple universities and willing and capable of doing that research. But until we actually have the federal law change, we can't. We have to do that research abroad. So I've done some work trying to create some of that research in foreign countries, but until the US federal law gets off their high horse and reschedules, deschedules, or creates a exemption for medical cannabis research, a lot of the doctors are kind of stuck in that mindset where they want to see a cannabinoid pharmaceutical pill and when we have those pills, they can be covered by insurance. That's great. But what they cannot talk about, just due to the lack of research, are the nutraceuticals and herbal supplements. And we have a wonderful opportunity to be able to create companies with good corporate social responsibility to create herbal supplements to minimize the deleterious effects of many medical conditions. And we can't make medical claims on nutraceuticals or herbal supplements, but we can formulate them in ways that we know that they're going to be beneficial to our microbiome. And I think that's really the key, is being able to, everybody says eat an apple a day keeps a doctor away. Eat your greens. Cannabis should be treated as a essential amino acid. It should be treated as a essential fatty acid. It should be treated as a quintessential part of the dietary intake of all humans. And the difficult part is, when many doctors have gone to school over the past 50 years, but the endocannabinoid system has not been really researched, and it wasn't discovered until the 80s. It's not really researched or even taught in universities. And we're seeing the same thing. The endocrine system wasn't really discovered until the 50s. You could not learn about the endocrine system in any med school until the 80s and 90s. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see lots of doctors specifically studying endocrine biology to help treat the hormone issues. And a lot of those hormone issues are created by bad diet or bad microbiota in your system that's not creating the right ecosystem within our microbiome. So I think that as sites like Granny Crow's List becomes more widely dispersed, Granny Crow's List has 700 reviewed research papers on cannabis, but
Granny Stormcrow.
Thank you.
Granny Stormcrow.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah, so being able to provide that education to the doctors, they cannot prescribe the nutraceutical or herbal supplements just due to regulations, but they can we can, as a community, create good corporate social responsibility, educate those doctors, as well as kind of promote that research through the companies that we're developing.
That's a good idea, and I kind of did this back in days, and kind of I had to do the same thing. Is I had to force my doctors to understand that cannabis was helping me with my conditions, and just like Michelle Rainey back in the late '80s, early '90s, we put together doctors' educational packages. Enough education. Some of them are 36 pages long just for the applications in order to apply for medical marijuana in Canada. But we put together little doctor packages. I focused on injured workers, spinal cord injury. Michelle's focused on cancer, stuff like that. And like yourself, you can focus on getting those packages put together that has all of that data that we've actually, you can look through PubMed, case journals, stuff like that, and just put together a nice little doctor's package. When the doctor asks you a question, you can present him with, here's the data that we have, here's the stuff that I'm working on, and here's our foundation, and get more people on board. I think it's kind of like more back to the grassroots of being able to, like, they're not going to click on the link, but if you give them something that they can sit back at a coffee and read, then they might draw some interest and they see how it's working for you and they can see the benefits. And I think it's really important that we still offer that little packages to the doctors and stuff like that in order to get the education out there, and it draws more interest. I mean, there's so many different ways of being able to get doctors to understand how it's working for one another, and you're a prime example of what you're doing, like just getting that information out there.
I think it's a good idea too. And I remember when you were doing that, John, because even when you took me to go see my doctor, you brought a big, it was way more than 36 pages. It was
probably like 100
pages or something. But basically, if we can get these type of really good packages for specific things, to these doctors, and you get it out to enough doctors, eventually what we're going to do is we're going to find the cool doctor, the one who's really willing to hear and listen. And that doctor will be so important, those doctors, because they are the ones that will go on to teach the other doctors that will never hear this from a certain type of person, basically a non-doctor. No, you're not going to teach a doctor about medicine. It's just like it's part of their ego. Like 99.9% of them cannot be taught. And there's this one, and I seen John get through to them, the little 1%, where it's just like, this is great stuff. Do you have any more? And they're devouring it and reading it, and they're interested in it. And now they're going and doing their own deep dives. And I think those doctors will be very important in the sort of education of, the line of doctors that are up now, but more so the new line, the new group that will be coming and going through medical schools. Clearly, the endocannabinoid system has to be taught in medicine.
They have to be doing it now. I think it's got to be mandatory in the new
totally
agree. System.
We have over 100 years of bad PR to get around.
And there's only one. And there's only one university teaching cannabinoid classes that I've heard about. There's a couple of cannabis trade schools, but I believe there's a university in Michigan that you can take a certificate for cannabinoids.
Well, if you're a doctor in Canada or nurse, you look up the Synergies 3. It was presented in 2012, 2013, and they educated 1,200 to 1,600 doctors across Canada on the opioid system and the endocannabinoid system, and how it was very similar and how it worked in the CNS. It was actually a really good little thing, and it's great for a good start for doctors in Canada to look at because it's already being presented.
I think one of the things that's going to come is as people become more aware of the fact that cannabis itself can't do any harm, as doctors start understanding how true that is in association with the benefits that cannabis can do, when they start looking at the pharmacopoeia, all the pharmaceutical drugs that they have, every one of them has a lethal dose. Every one of them can kill you and often create all kinds of other problems. Many of the old people that I speak with are taking multiple pharmaceutical drugs. And when you start digging into that whole list of things and start looking at side effects, some of the drugs are prescribed to offset side effects of other drugs that they're taking. And you end up with this mad salad of pharmaceuticals in their bodies, and it creates all kinds of health problems. And what's true is when you start eliminating those and you start working with whole plant cannabis medicine, that's the thing. It's like when you look at specific isolated compounds like Marinol is supposed to be a pharmaceutical replicant of THC. And yet you see widely different results from Marinol. It just doesn't work as well as straight up cannabis. And again, no lethal dose with cannabis. There's all these potential benefits from its use. I think it was Russo that should be credited with the concept of the endocannabinoid deficiency syndromes. And it's basically a list of all kinds of conditions, everything from autism to cancer to epilepsy to MS to Hodgkin's lymphoma, on, that all of these conditions respond, some better than others, to cannabis preparations. And the suggestion there is that all of these are conditions that arise from imbalance in the endocannabinoid system. And it's not any one cannabinoid. It's not CBD, it's not THC, it's not CBC, it's the whole symphony of this beautiful chemistry that this plant that we love so much makes. That's where the magic is. And what doctors and patients all across the world are starting to understand is that it's the plant itself and the chemistry she produces that's going to do this healing work for us. When Kelly was referencing working with clinics where doctors from Western medicine don't have their machines, but they still see healing. And that's the thing. Healing happens in hospitals, but it also happens in homes. And increasingly at home, people are making preparations from the cannabis plant and seeing benefit from it for people that they love. And that's because it actually works. It addresses the endocannabinoid deficiencies that we're all experiencing because of the toxic effects of stress, insufficient biome in our diet, on and on and on, the list goes. But many of us are experiencing these health issues. And what's true is cannabis has the potential to be of benefit to all of those conditions. And the trick is finding the preparations that will benefit that person. And Turner's family, you're a perfect example of it. You found the preparation that was going to help Collin. You increased the dose to the point of benefit, and he was able to leave the hospital. And I'm blown away to hear that you say, I think you said, he gained 30 pounds. Where did you put that on your body? As you're sitting there, I don't see it.
Seriously. Like, damn.
He's grown.
That's all. I'm going to sign off and listen.
So I don't know where he put it either. He eats like crazy, and he's just he's just a thin kid. But when it comes to when you were talking about genetics earlier and talking about whole plant and making sure that this spectrum is there, one of the things that we're kind of back and forth on that, and that's what scares us, is that the medicine that he takes is actually an isolate, and only because there was an issue with THCV with him. So with a Crohn's patient, he has a hard time gaining weight. So when he gained 30 pounds within this last 6 months, we've been really, really happy. But THCV is an appetite suppressant. So making sure that people who don't have wasting syndromes like Coltyn not get THCV is very, very important. So when it comes to isolate versus full spectrum, this is a really, really hard situation for us.
Because THCV, is, bad for people. It's not necessarily bad because it helps people who just want to lose weight or have diabetes. And I've also heard that people with PTSD have been benefiting from THCV. But for someone with a wasting syndrome, it's deadly. So we need to make sure that we aren't taking the cannabinoids that
we need to be able to identify the adverse effects. I have been greatly benefited by CBD and CBDV, but THCV in particular can actually, in stressful situations, can trigger my epileptic seizures. And so in general, I avoid strains with THCV. But I also know people who have treated depression benefited by CBD and CBDV. But
Sorry
Yeah,
about
and I
that.
think that these cannabinoids, making sure that we understand the genetics of these plants, and I think genetics is just exactly where we need to be studying, um, is very crucial to the history and to the future of this plant, making sure that we have specific medicine for specific diseases, and we can grow those plants in coordinates with what Colton needs for Crohn's disease, or what, you know, Sally needs for her seizures, or whatever, and those, hopefully can help determine that this strain is better for Crohn's, or that strain is better for cancer, because even the terpenes matter to us, and it's just, it's a wild ride, and we have so far to go, and I think that creating this foundation and making sure that we are supporting people that are researching every single aspect of this plant is so important.
I think it goes back to the quiver once again, because once again, the division of humanity, you see people like, they'll make these super strong posts about why isolate is wrong, and it's all about full spectrum. And I get it. It's like, yeah, Skunkman Sam showed us all about terpene in modulation in the early 2000s, and years later, some of those people like Ed Rosenthal wrote articles about myrcene and mangoes, and Ethan Russo came out with the entourage effect. And 20 years later, this conversation's escalated to the point where everyone's really hip and they're on it, and it's like, yeah, some people need terpenes, some people would like isolate, some people don't want this cannabinoid, some people want these two cannabinoids. Like, we need to have access to all of it. We need to be able to take it apart and study it and figure out mechanisms, and then we need to have access to full plant, regeneratively, organically grown, like beautiful cannabis. But once again, I just fall on both sides in the sense of like, both are as important. And obviously, as Colton sits there telling us that he's taking isolate right now, obviously it's a very dangerous statement to go out and say, isolate's not going to do it for you. You need full spectrum. And then what are people's versions of full spectrum? Like, are they collecting the entire cannabinoid and terpene profile and all the different types of trichomes that are present on their plant? Probably not. If they're doing traditional hash methods, they're probably leaving most of the bulbous heads behind. So that won't be full spectrum. There's just so many different ways of looking at it. I think personally, let's make sure everything is available for those that want to have access to it.
Absolutely. And so we obviously want to be able to.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah, I'd love to hear Sam's take on all this. I know you've been working with Marinol for extremely long time, and it would be really helpful and really great insight to hear your insight on that.
Well, I can talk about that, but what I actually wanted to talk about was genetic IPs for just a moment. I don't know if everybody heard that in Colorado, they are now allowing plant registration of cannabis varieties under UPOG. Has anybody heard that?
Yes, I have, Sam. This is Collin.
And as for patents, I've heard several people say that, patents for plant that hasn't existed in nature, and the only way they can prove that is has it been tested and is it in the literature, then you can patent it, and you can challenge it all you want, but unless you can prove that it was already in public domain before the patent, then you can't fight it.
Can everyone hear him clearly? Because it sounds like he's coming in and out to me.
I lost a big chunk of that, but I got the very end of it.
I got most of it.
Yeah, I'm having real problems. I don't know what to do to make it any better.
Smoke some hash. That always makes everything better.
Smoke some hash.
Except when you've dropped your dabber and it literally fell through a porthole and is gone. My dabber is gone. My dabber has fallen into a porthole.
Don't lose your dab.
My camera, hoping that would.
I mean, I didn't totally hear everything what he was saying. Was he saying that it was really hard to patent?
No, he was saying that, listen, if you can prove that it's never a part of the open source, the black market, if you've got something unique, it can be patented. He was basically saying.
Sort of. I mean, there's. I don't know if you guys want to get into like technical patent land, but I'm here to provide that information if you would like it. It is also Sunday morning. I don't know if it's too early for technical patent land.
Give us patent land.
Give you patent land.
Yeah. So, define prior art in the cannabis genetic realm.
Yes,
sure,
please.
Sure. So, all right. So within so prior art in the genetic realm. So all told, prior art, sorry, there's people talking in my house and it's making it hard to talk to you guys. I'm going to go outside, which is actually better anyway, because it's like kind of beautiful out there. And then we can spend time in the garden. Okay. Sorry about that. So prior art in the genetics realm. So prior art in general is any sort of like documentation about a like any kind of invention that exists. And when, you know, just to give people an idea of the process, when an application goes to the patent office, the patent examiner has the obligation to look for all kinds of things that might be similar to it, you know, so like like something comes in, someone says they invented something, there's a bunch of claims, and then patent examiners go and look for things that match the claims in the document. And that the evidence in the documents that they look to is known as prior art. So within the realm of prior art, there are some specific rules about what is and is not prior art, at least within the US. Also, I should also always just say I'm not a lawyer and this is not legal advice, but this is stuff that I've learned from talking to lots of lawyers. And if there's any lawyers out there, I always ask them to, if I'm technically incorrect about anything, please openly correct me. I'm fine with that. But in any case, but my understanding is the way it works is, so, you know, anything that the patent office looks to is known as prior art. And there's a whole section in the patent code that is about what is prior art. They definitely look at things like old patent applications, and they also definitely look to things like academic journals and printed publications and another sort of set list of things. One of those set list of things is the National Center for Biotechnology Information, the NCBI. And for genetic information and for genetic data that has been referenced on Open Cannabis Project, it is all actually hosted on the National Center for Biotechnology Information. So from a genetics and prior art perspective, that's really the place where it goes, and where it's the most important place to look to. I've spoken with last year I got on the phone with a supervisor at the patent office in the plant department and let him know about data.opencannabisproject.org. He also knew about the Phylos galaxy. So those two things, at least through that kind of realm, are considered by some as prior art. So, and the plant officer told me that it was something that he wanted to make sure that his department knew about. So in any case, so that's sort of how genetics plays into prior art. But within the realm of the actual patents that are coming in, part of the reason why Open Cannabis Project switched to collecting chemical data last year was because a lot of the patent applications coming in actually reference chemical compounds and chemical formulations. And so that actually also becomes, in some ways, at least right now, more important with regards to prior art. However, many people have argued that even though genetic information isn't as useful right now for prior art, it can be useful in the future. And when it comes to doing the most robust kind of prior art documentation, which is something that Open Cannabis Project was not ever able to do, but maybe is something that can come from future efforts and like, you know, new partnerships and all that kind of stuff is the idea of actually doing whole plant documentation. And similar, if anyone's listened to Dr. Eleanor Kuntz, who is kind of my hero in this and her work at the Candor Herbarium, what she's talking about is actually doing really like thorough documentation of the cannabis plant itself, which provides more information that would be useful to the patent office, such as, you know, what strains it's been, and to breeders actually, honestly, depending on how you share and sort the information, what strains have been bred with the strain, what environment was it grown in, like what other special information can you share about the lineage of this plant and what's gone into it, like that. When you're talking about like what is a plant, I mean, I think that most people agree that it's like genetics plus environment plus cultivation equals phenotype. So like all of that really needs to be documented if we're going to do really thorough prior art documentation. And then that information can be, as long as that information is searchable and organized enough, and you can submit it to the patent office in booklet form, which is something that I think that as we look to solutions for getting prior art in front of the patent office, it's either creating, which I tried to do with Open Cannabis Project. MIT actually has a prior art database. It would be great to get all of these cannabis strains into that. I haven't gotten an answer on whether they'll do that. And of course, universities are in this really tough position when it comes to information about cannabis because it's still federally illegal and they get a lot of federal funding. So, but in any case, that's at least hopefully beginning to help answer the question. And I'm happy to answer any more. But speaking to the idea that like people can just patent things that are already in the public domain, I would actually say that, whether people realize it or not, like people have like Open Cannabis Project, Medicinal Genomics, Phylos, the cannabis community, people have made a lot of noise about saying, hey, don't issue patents on things that already exist. And I would, I haven't actually seen any more overbroad patents issued since the first, potentially overbroad patents issued since the first ones that have been issued to the Biotech Institute, right? So I don't act, and like, I know that patent applications like that are coming in, but how many do you see? So far, 0. So to some degree, I don't see as much like of an actual risk from the patent office patenting things that are already in the public domain, because there is more information available now and people have made us think about it and they know about all of these references. And so it's, yeah. So I think that there is reason to fear it, but I also think that as where I think a lot of the litigation that's going to happen with regards to overbroad patents and taking things out of the public domain actually has a lot more to do with like herbal formulations and like formulations and processing methods than it does on the plants themselves. So anyway, that's my long-winded nerdy rant. Feel free to ask questions.
So normally when you're developing a patent application for genetic cultivar or a species of plant in other realms, be it hops or in the agricultural industry, they're looking for a couple different factors that Beth mentioned. Phenotypic, what's it grow, what's it produce. When you start looking at genetically engineered, you have to be able to show that the gene sequence that you're selecting for is exhibited in over 80% of the populations, and oftentimes in order to create that speciation or novel, the patent office, especially when they're patenting germ lines or genetic lines, they want to be able to see that a significant majority of the seeds that are planted are going to exhibit that trait. So a F1 multi-poly hybrid has not been stabilized enough to be able to show those, standardized traits within its cultivar. So I'm seeing kind of several things happen where people are finding rare mutations in some of their CBD things and considering it novel. And that rare mutation has to then be inbred, stabilized, essentially worked until it becomes a significant majority of genetic expression, and essentially selecting for the recessive traits in order to lock those recessive traits in. With so I think there's a lot of concern that, breeders are going to do F1 hybrids and then try and patent them. The reality is that breeding is going to involve multiple generations of stabilization in order to start protecting those patents. Or
Absolutely correct. You're dead on. And that's the most difficult part about everything right now, is that there's such misinformation out there that everyone's feelers are up, and we just need to dispel a lot of this stuff so everyone really truly understands that it's a lot more difficult than just like fixing things and trying to do a basic flip. You can't do that.
Yeah, and ultimately, that's where genetic companies that are testing the genetics, producing those tests for their customers is really useful, because breeders, if they can, and I've done this on multi-acreage scale, where we'll send in large numbers of CBD seedlings to get tested, identify the ones that are female that also exhibit the double recessive CBDA alleles, and then be able to mass propagate those so that you end up having, instead of one standardized seed, you have a couple different cultivars that you're then propagating into a field regenerative system. That way you can then, not have to worry about, culling all of the hermaphroditic traits or the hot traits. But on the same hand, it would be great if companies that are doing that genetic tested facilitated distribution of those genetics through some sort of open licensing, even if those open licensing includes kickbacks to the breeders or the genetic developers. But I think the concern is a perceived conflict of interest, and there may be separate companies, but there is somewhat a perceived conflict of interest in when a genetic testing company is then creating a genetic nursery company. Now, the likelihood that a leaf tissue sample could get turned back into stem cells and then repropagated is very low. But there is a risk for anyone who has submitted seeds, especially seeds in mass, to a genetic company, because if I'm running a testing laboratory for testing the chemotrophic samples of cannabis, I'm going to save part of my sample in case if the test comes back weird, so I can retest it, just to standardize that test. Now, I don't think that any genetic companies are repopulating genetics, but I do believe that they are, correlating their data, and you can use once you start identifying, hey, this one allele trait that showed up on our genetic sequence that we weren't looking for, years later could potentially be used for creating this precursor to a novel cannabinoid, because there are numerous cannabinoids that aren't in wide distribution. And if we can find those significantly recessive allele genetic SNPs, then we could potentially say, okay, this strain from this breeder, this strain from this breeder, these 4 strains from these 4 breeders. Now we can start developing a breeding platform to be able to select for those rare genetic alleles, to create rare genetic cannabinoids, reinforce those over 8 to 10 generations until it becomes a predominant profile. And that's going to require a lot of testing. That's going to require a lot of work, a lot of space, and we want the people doing that genetic work to be able to see some success from that.
Right.
But at the same time, so in some realm, I think that I think patents are going to be a necessity, but what we do with those patents, we don't want to be able to take rare genetic alleles off the market and only make them available in pharmaceutical drugs. It's far better to be able to have that a multiple.
Sam sounds like the teacher on Charlie Brown. We lost you, Sam. We lost you.
This is crucial, Sam. I wish you were in this one.
I know. It's like there's quite a few things
Crucial.
I want to hear from him right now. It's harsh.
I do. There's so much. Well, you're absolutely.
Can you
right.
hear me?
And that's the truth of it all.
I hear you now.
There he goes.
Whoa. But now I don't.
And is my voice normal or is it all screwed up?
It's kind of screwed up, but that's normal. I knew you'd appreciate that one.
Well, I just want to say that in Colorado this month, the first UPA plant registration breeders' rights has been applied for.
I am wondering if this comment can be submitted in the chat because I really want to hear it. And I think that all of us are struggling because we want to hear it, but the audio connection does not seem to be working.
Yeah, you should type it, Sam, and then we can all read it, or send it to me in Skype or whatever works, because I really do want to hear from you right now.
Yeah, I think I only heard parts of that, but I think what he mentioned was so recently the U.S. Department of Agriculture has started saying that they're allowing plant registration on cannabis cultivars. Now, they're primarily phrasing that in the realm of hemp cultivars, but in the last month, there have been a few Colorado hemp cultivars that were developed from cultivars not indigenous to Colorado, but they've been worked by companies in Colorado, and they have been applied for on that plant registration. So we are going to start to see that starting to happen. And I've even seen a couple of these CBD seed breeders are requiring their customers to sign material transfer agreements that requires non-replication, which I kind of understand. A seed breeder doesn't want to have his seeds knocked off, but they also include things like no cloning and no breeding with those strains. And it's the reason why that company is doing that is because they want to be able to start protecting those lines, and they don't want to have their work knocked off. But I think it's a little bit over intrusive to try and require people to develop your work. And to be honest, I think it's bad marketing. If you're developing a line that ends up becoming, for example, the next Harlequin or Charlotte's Web, tons of potential there, and that's people working with your line it's only going to benefit them. Sam, you there?
He's there, but I bet you it's not going to sound any better than it has.
I mean, that's kind of how we feel. Is every event that we've gone to, we have seed swaps, and it's always like the funnest thing about the event, just sharing genetics and doing all this stuff. But then it's like we come around the corner after a seed swap and then slam on brakes and we're, oh my God, why we have to start. I'm going to stop going to seed swaps now. I'm going to start saving all my seeds because I'm just nervous someone else is going to maybe do it better than me, or they're going to mass produce it and they're going to take me out of it. And I really just believe that the art is in creating the genetic. It's not just the genetic. I think that we're all lucky to even be talking about this, if we're honest with each other, because this plant came from wherever it came from.
Somebody did it before us.
And we're putting intellectual property into it. I mean, the Bubba Kush, the Bubba Kush hemp, I mean, that's an amazing, intellectual thing that was created there. And there's a lot of value to that. But in general, I think like with IP and recipes, we've always given out everything for free, and we even have a company that's potentially threatened by giving out that information. But we just feel like if someone takes that and makes the world a better place, then who's really losing? So we're just challenged to become better and more
And
diverse.
how can you own a part of a plant's evolution? We're all evolving. I don't understand like this ownership of evolution. It just doesn't make sense to me. We're always evolving. The plant is always evolving. So you're patenting something that's like way back in 2018, and then it's going to evolve so many times past that. It's just a really interesting conversation, and I think that we have some kind of a disease or a virus inside of our DNA that we thrive off of competition. And I think that we have this ability for the plant and what she's taught us and the way that we commune within the cannabis culture to really drop that idea of competition and be able to share and open source it and make it already art that has happened before, so that other people can't have it. And I think that a lot of people in the cannabis culture are not really wanting necessarily to own something. They just don't want somebody else to own it so that we can't work with it. And I think that that's really more of the focus.
And I mean, we want people to have good business. We want people to protect, you know, something that they've created. All that is a real thing. But I think that we shouldn't be threatened by something else bigger and better. That's the way we feel. I mean, and you guys can say what you.
Well, imagine if the guy who created a guitar said no one else could make guitars. I mean,
dude, I use that
real big extract. It's super extract.
Yeah.
I get it. But at the same time, like, like, come on, you know, there would be no diversity in music and in culture, and that too transcends culture and humanity in so many ways, just like cannabis does.
Yet at the same time, when Quincy Jones takes like particular notes and puts them in an order,
absolutely,
he can own those now.
No doubt. Yep.
But they can also be sampled and turned into something else.
Totally. Exactly. Which is awesome. Like, how cool is that?
But this is actually where I think that because y'all are talking about like it's interesting in this conversation because it brings up a really important point. And actually, it brings up a really important point about intellectual property and the word intellectual property. And I think it's a word that I don't want to use anymore because it's actually really confusing. And it's confusing because it is one word. And this is actually like after all this crazy with Open Cannabis Project and reading more Richard Stallman and all that kind of stuff. He's actually one who comes up with this idea that like intellectual property actually is a term that is meant to reference, depending on who you're talking to, between 3 and 9 different sets of laws that actually all work differently. So like Quincy Jones's notes that he puts together is covered under copyright. That is one set of laws that is applied. Plants are covered under not only patent law, but they're also covered under USDA protections, which is actually the plant variety protection thing that I think that Sam was talking about that opened up in Colorado, but I need to look that up. The plant variety protection is for stable seed lines, right? And that's actually run by the USDA. And then there is ownership law at play, so there is ownership law at play. For example, like when we talk about plants or seeds that are in the public domain, right? Plants and seeds that might be in the public domain from a patenting standpoint and from a USDA standpoint still might be owned by somebody, right? Like they might be owned by, they might be owned by Bubble Man, for example. And so, if they are actually owned by somebody, then they are affected by the law, the rules of contract law. And so, and it's interesting because all of these laws are kind of at odds with what we think and how we feel, but understanding them, and this is where I feel like education is really important for this community in particular. I want for us to be able to understand how these laws work so that we can effectively use these tools. And I'm not saying that patents are it. I actually really don't like patents on plants, especially cannabis plants, but like we need to be able to understand how these laws work so that we can effectively navigate it and not be caught in a situation where we actually hurt ourselves because we misunderstood something or conflated a couple of different concepts.
Yeah, and careful when you're talking about it and you don't make your statement that you're not really pro plant patents, because man, can you trigger some people. Whew. Plant patents in the cannabis world, triggers.
It total triggers, and also like plant, but this is where I also like, I kind of have like a challenge or like a challenging question that I would be interested to hear from folks on this group about, which is that like, okay, so a plant patent really covers a single plant and its clones, and that's it. USDA protection covers a stable seed line, and that's it. Utility patents can cover like, you know, within one document, like a plant plus its clones, plus its seeds, plus all the products made with it, plus anything made with it. And so, you know, my question is like, from an ethical standpoint, what is wrong with a plant patent or a USDA stable seed line protection if all that it really says is, yes, I invented this, but sure, people can still breed with it? I actually don't necessarily think it's a good use of money or time, but I'm interested to hear from the group, like what your thoughts are on these like different types of like protection options and where the ethical lines are drawn within the beliefs of the community.
I think the problem with the ethical lines is that they are warped and manipulated by the lawyers who write up these laws and these you know, documents in the first place. So that's kind of probably the main problem, that it becomes corrupted from the start. Literally, the foundation of it is like, I mean, a good lawyer's job is to stretch and to find that the envelope and to kind of get it, you know, let's push it even further in our favor, because, you know, that's I work for my client and I'm looking to, you know, best that interest. And I mean, there's lots of good jokes about lawyers, as we all know.
So yeah, and then the question of the ethics behind the people that are submitting that said patent, and there's, you know, the intention behind it. I mean, there's so much that goes on and on that, you know, is clearly undefinable until it's too late.
Yeah, and let's start with a clone, because I think that's one of the more narrow ones. You know, I've heard of several different, you know, companies in multiple states that were looking for genetics to bring into their production facilities. Now, it's difficult to have interstate commerce, but there are ways that you can, you know, immaculately conceive those genetics into those things and then create a licensing on copyright. I think it's copyrighted or trademarked names. And I've actually seen some European seed companies that are trademarking names. And then if you're a licensed producer, you can license that trademarked name in order to sell those seed lines. Now,
I get approached all the time like that, to be honest. There's a ton of people out there absolutely going out there, reaching out to people.
Yeah, and if a breeder has to spend the money and is, you know, doing breeding properly, I'm not talking about pollen chucking. I'm talking about, you know, developing facilities that are you know, specifically designed to prevent pollen from spreading around, cross-pollination. You have to build, you know, pollination chambers for your breeding programs. If you're doing those pheno hunting to develop those lines, then as interstate and international commerce begins, it's going to be very beneficial to the breeders to develop those lines and potentially license them out, just so that, you know. Now, that said, the minute you start selling seeds, for example, it's difficult to license a strain to a grower, say to a farm, if you're also selling seeds, because that farm's part of the licensee, legally speaking, wants to know that they're going to be, if they're going to pay that premium to have that specific clone, then, you know, they want to know that you're not openly distributing that clone. Now, I've seen licenses where that, you know, you have that proprietary clone, but you still can have genetic hybrids available. And I think some breeders in Europe are doing that, where they're still selling seeds, but if you want a exclusive license on this chemotrophic profile of this phenotype of this gene sequence cut of this clone, then I think that's a good way for, you know, growers and specifically breeders to generate revenue when you can't have those genetics legally transferring across jurisdictional boundaries. Now, Canada has a pedigreed seed program. A couple European countries also have pedigreed seed programs. And part of that pedigreed seed, I think Josh and Kelly mentioned earlier, developing feminized line. You have to, if you're going to do a pedigreed seed program, not only do you have to create that standardized seed, but you also have to be able to produce it where you and your farm minimizes risk of pollination. And there are parts of Oregon that had really big problems with cross-pollination from hemp farms that were doing breeding were getting pollinated by hemp farms that were just open pollinating hybrids to harvest seeds. And so Canada actually has rules and regulations around pedigreed seed varieties. And while I personally may not be really interested in a feminized auto-flowering line, there are lots of corn farmers and soybean farmers and wheat farmers that need those genetics, need those pedigreed seeds in mass by the ton to be able to plant those crops and stop growing unsustainable crops in monoculture.
And a lot of those farming realms have seed maps. Different food farmers have seed maps of what's grown where, because if you're, say, a cabbage farmer, you don't want to be downwind from a kale farmer or a broccoli or something like that. So you don't get cross pollination. So I think that it would be important for us to develop seed maps within, for sure, the hemp realm, because hemp is easily thrown around up here in Canada or in different realms as, is it seed and fiber hemp, which you would grow male and female, or is it medicinal hemp, which you would grow, all female for medicinal? And there really should be a different classification of that hemp. And I think there's talk about that, but there really should be seed maps, because there's a huge level of responsibility that comes from growing cannabis because of its pollen. And obviously it was a problem with soybeans because of what happened with Percy Schmeiser and all that with, genetic pollen drift and all that. But, it's something that does require responsibility. And I think that, and getting to know our genetics better so we don't have hermaphrodites, because you could grow 40 acres of feminized seed, and there is still pollen that can get created in that field. You can't just walk away and plant 40 acres of feminized seed and just guarantee that there's not going to be some pollen in there. So I think there's some responsibility to say, okay, you can grow 40 acres of hemp, but, it doesn't mean that because you're a 40-acre hemp farm and you have machinery that you're not supposed to walk the field still.
And to throw a little bit of a loop in it, there's everybody who's the home grower, and everybody in every area has their 4 plants, and guaranteed there's going to be pollen all over the place. So pollen happens.
Yeah,
we need to make a shirt. It would piss a lot of people off, but it would be funny.
We got to get together with the 4 plant fam.
That's what I'm
make sure everyone's on board
with Canada and the 4 plants, and with all the new growers out there. Even I was at the hydroponic store. I spent half the day there yesterday with all these new growers coming in and wondering where they can get seeds, where they can get clones, what's their best way of growing. And right now for us, we're just kind of putting people more towards like an autopilot system so they don't really overfeed or whatever like that, who want to go indoors. But I mean, it comes down to a big thing right now is about seeds, what you can actually get through the government right now, which is, I think, is through Alberta. You can buy some seeds and stuff like that. But there's lots of online seed companies, and people are buying seeds, want to know about feminized seed lines, want to know what seeds to buy, what's going to be better for their condition, and where did they go to get this information. So there's this whole new other industry that people aren't even looking at right now, and I see it explosion in all the local hydroponic stores of all the new novice growers who want to grow for their grandma because they have this pain or they want to try this for that. And I think it's just another real way of now educating people on how to grow their own 4 plants in Canada and really get into how they can get up every day and help them.
Nice, Johnny B.
Yeah, no doubt, Johnny.
and four plants in the world. I mean, countries all over the world are starting to allow four plants, and people are really coming on and learning about the medicine. We've made our hemp oil with medicinal mushrooms for, a lot of years now. And we've worked with families that have had to continue buying medicine from the hospital in order to not be red flagged by the medical industry, and then just stopped using that medicine, but they just kept buying it because they just didn't want to be a red flag, and they were able to cure themselves through this medicine and everything. So it is a really powerful medicine. I do feel like we have this knowledge, 100 years ago in the 1800s, cannabis was part of a lot of the medicines, and hemp was used in agriculture and as fodder for animals. And that was at a time when THC hadn't been bred into the plant, so there was a wider spectrum. I think there was a general more health, and I think that, and I really do wonder if, as they were starting to control plants and create industrial farming with synthetic fertilizers, and I think the plant being such a fractal medicine, such a changeable medicine, I think that's what's good for our body. I think that when you're a patient, you want to have the same strain because you want to have the same effects. But I think that you can, it's sometimes a little bit of variation with that, with similar strains can be really positive to your body. And sometimes having the same thing over and over isn't necessarily something that's good for longevity. So the plant has shown us that it changes a little bit. And I think that there's probably a point of health to that we might want to embrace and not need to like control certain aspects or certain breedings. But I mean, we're interested in learning
and
more.
basically just flooding the cannabinoid system, our endocannabinoid system with all different cannabinoids. And that is important. And I do understand isolating, and I do understand, the distillate. I get that. And patients being able to use that, but also being able to flood the endocannabinoid system with all different forms of medicine, whether you're smoking it, you're vaping it, you're eating it, you're using it rectally, you're using it on your skin. These are all really important things that I think that we need to do to better our health. And what Josh was saying is that the plant is always mutating, it's always changing, not mutating, but it's always transitioning. It's always in a form of evolution and evolving. So it changes a lot of its cannabinoid ratios and terpene ratios with different areas that it's growing in. And that's really cool. We can follow that lead of the plant, and she can teach us so much in that.
Yeah, nature's chemist, right? I mean, it's such a beautiful thing.
But we also need to make sure that we have consistent medicine. One of the situations that we always run into, just being patients going into a dispensary, is that you can't always find Harlequin. You can't always find Kim Dog. You can't always find the specific strains that you're wanting to, that make your headache go away or make his Crohn's help. We also need consistency in genetics. We need to keep continuing to make new cultivars and have new products. But we also need to have consistency too. And if somebody would just keep growing Harlequin or sour tsunami, then we would be so happy, because it's a consistent medicine.
Well, it's interesting.
Totally agree with that. And that part of the evolution and finding new strains, is the evolution of different medicine. But then when you find it is really important. And to continue that.
And there's incredible power in four plants, and learning from somebody who's cultivated for a long time, you can get a tremendous amount of weight off of four plants. And I think that we're really encouraging home growers to find the medicine that's good for them, get the strains that works for them, and make their own medicine, because then that's going to be able to give us a greater education in being able to commune with the plant and understand what it gives us and what it means to be able to make medicine. So I think that I agree with you that we absolutely need to find, solid lines for what works with us, but that's going to happen through people growing their four.
And you'd almost have to say, then you have to clone them. And so sometimes keeping clones alive is a hard thing to do as a farmer. So then we're going to seeds. And when we have seeds, then there's a little bit of variation. So, from a farming perspective, we have to kind of weigh that out. Do we want to have a clone farm for consistent medicine because it makes so much sense and you're getting what you want? But there's, different. There can be pathogens or different things that come with clone farms. So if we can find a really stable seed line that gives us chemovars that are really close to what you want, I think as a farmer and something that's better for the, for our evolution, I think that would be an ideal situation. But
the thing is,
and
thing
showing
about
these farmers how to
home-
grow those genetics as well.
Farmers and patients need access. And in states like Illinois, they can't, home grow is difficult. So,
it's very difficult.
It's not allowed, right?
Home grow is not just difficult as a state regulated process, because home grow in the state of Illinois is going to come, but it is going to be ridiculously over regulated, and we're going to have somebody come into our home and check our plants and check where it's supposed to, where we're growing it, and blah blah blah. So now we have a police officer in our house, which is total. That's another conversation altogether. But I have 4 children, and and he's extremely busy all the time, and we own a business, and we have other children that are off doing things. So having a home grow is very, very difficult, especially in the state of Illinois if home grow passes, because you can't have your neighbor come over and water your plants. So home grow, even though I completely support it, and I would love to home grow because I can't, I suck at it. But I would like to do it, and at least have that opportunity. Home grow can be very difficult for a lot of people, and home grow is very difficult for a mom who is a single mom who has a disabled child. They're doing enough as it is. So we really have to, depend on the growers and the cultivation system, the commercial cultivation system, because we don't have the time and effort and energies to be able to do that kind of thing.
And there's a really interesting frame here when it comes to both trying to create really well-regulated, consistent medicine, and plants, as well as when we're trying to get that kind of real variance. And like you were talking about that, the variety of, cannabinoid and terpene profiles that naturally evolves and gives us that diversity. So it's not like we're eating, in a nutritional analogy, it's not like we're eating the same foods every day. We've got diversity in the diet, having diversity in, what we're taking in cannabinoid wise and terpene wise. In both of these cases, a huge piece of this comes down to the epigenetics, right? That we've been talking so much about the genotype and we've talked about, that environment plus growing, combining with genotype, getting that phenotype expression, and really so much variance on that epigenetic expression based on everything from the microbiome in the rhizosphere, right, to the soil, to the nutrients, to the all these different environmental conditions. You could take, one genotype and seed source, or even clones, grow them in completely different environments, and get totally different cannabinoid and terpene profiles. And so I think, in addition to really emphasizing cultivating the genotypes and those really good genetics, which I think is so crucial, I agree completely, really developing and refining how we're supporting, regulating that epigenetic side of it, both for, when we're trying to grow specifically for really consistent, profiles. I think that's really important for that, as well as when we're trying to get that real diversity that's going to allow us to get those different, essentially, cannabis nutrients, different cannabinoids and terpenes and that kind of thing for that variety. I think that's just such a crucial piece to really have in play.
Yeah, the
Well
polymorphic aspect that you're speaking on, super important. Yeah, super well said.
And I'm at a loss for words. Are you Peter's friend?
I am, yeah. I'm Jeff.
Okay. I was like, who the fuck is this dude that just came into the room? I'm like, but he's all like hitting points. Boom, bam. What do you think of them apples? I'm like, well, welcome, dude. Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate
That was
it.
a trip. I appreciate everyone on the panel today for coming in and sharing your time and having these conversations. I miss it on Sundays. I'm busy, as Wendy said. I have to sort of back Wendy up too on the that utopian, like everyone should grow their own medicine. I think it's an amazing idea. I got to put you on mute, Mike. You're banging around there.
Grown.
It's an amazing idea, and I've seen guys like Johnny B able to do it. There's people that can do it. I myself have a 98 plant license. I haven't grown a plant in probably over 2 years. I'm just too busy. I can't lay it on my wife who is caring for 3 children at any given time. It's not fair to her. It's not that easy for everyone to grow their own herb, just like it's not easy for everyone to have their own gardens and grow their own veggies and make their own clothes.
Kids are growing up soon. They might be able to help in the future.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of having a greenhouse. Don't get me wrong, but even at this point in my life, if I had a greenhouse behind my house with cannabis and food growing in it, I'd have to have someone to help do that work because I travel too much. These things require attention and they require love. What they don't require is like 5 and 7 and 10-day trips in during the most important okay, I've vegged them out. They're just starting to flower. They're 3 weeks into flower. I gotta go. It's like, ooh, week 4, 5, 6, gone for the whole thing. I've played it out too many times, and it's not that easy for everyone. And it's one more reason why, of course, we need home grows. We need everyone to be able to grow their own cannabis if they so choose. But on the flip side of things, we have to understand there's a whole group of people who are unable to grow their own cannabis for a variety of reasons, and they need to have access to both the full spectrums, the plants, the extracts, the isolates, everything. Don't anyone think that their opinion is better and bigger than having access to everything for everyone. That's the answer to me. Access for all.
Totally agreed. I love that. Thank you, Marcus. It's so important. And in all of those different ways of extraction and of caring and of cultivation, just do it socially and ecologically responsibly. And I think that then we've got it all the way around.
Totally.
And on that note, I've got this really nice Burmese hash out from Whistler that our friends brought out, and I just got to give some love to the old school hash making Whistler family there, that this is super dank and really good. And this Burmese strain is
really,
it's really sweet. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really?
It's super earthy and loving.
Is that the Burmese fucking incredible?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's super amazing. And also this ice wook, big up to the ice wook, Ganja Gill, because this Skittles gelato right now. Are you kidding me?
Oh shit!
I mean, really? I mean, it's time to take some candy.
Dude.
Yeah.
I got some tropical cookies.
You do?
Yeah, tropical cookies hash rosin from Heavenly Days, and then he also gave me a tiny little bit of. I gotta find it.
Show and tell.
Oh, what's the other one? Yeah, show and tell. It's
we got
the best part.
It was Mendo Breath. No, that's not Skittles, nice. Johnny B.
Love Mendo Breath.
That's not Skittles,
beautiful.
Johnny B.
On the bottom it is.
No, because I talked to Ro. You're making a mistake. You have the same thing I have: tropical cookies.
Okay.
And Mendo Breath.
Jesus.
I know. I meant to tell you that earlier. That because I was like, dude, you gave Johnny B the Skittles. He's like, I don't have any Skittles. I gave Johnny B the tropical cookies. What are you talking about?
I got the Special K. That was the stuff after the accident that kept me on the couch.
Oh yeah, that would be very much right up your alley.
Just boom, knock you out. And it's really, and that's the big thing about extractions and stuff like that. And really looking at that, I was really grateful to actually come across and getting some really sedating, really good indica, hardcore concentrates. I got in an accident, which a few people know, a couple weeks ago, and
that was accident 17.
Maybe no. But I mean, it's right away. I needed that harsh sedation. I needed that really good effect, and it came to me just like perfect timing, and then the uplifting as I'm kind of getting out of bed now, feeling a little bit better to kind of get you going and understanding your medicine and how it works is another great experience and education for yourself, and really paying attention to what you use every day and how it works within you. And it's just, you know, as if people know, it kind of gets me going every day. I love talking about it. So
Yeah, dude.
Cannabis Mantis says, never drive with John.
Okay, so here's the whole thing. So I was rear-ended, okay, by somebody who was texting and driving. That was the C4 or my C5. That was that major surgery. I was then rear-ended again by some idiot who made a left-hand turn when it said no left-hand turn, and rear-ended me. And then once again, I'm driving through an intersection where it's a flashing pedestrian crosswalk and this other thing. And as the light turns red, some guy handles me at full speed doing 100 and T-bones me. So all 3 accidents were never my fault, but I do drive a lot.
So repeat, never drive with John.
That's it.
Poor John.
I mean, but once again, I mean, I've only used cannabis.
Probably a really good driver.
Accident. I did it for my before my injuries. When I came out of my surgery, Mark showed up with 50 different terpenes. At that point, I really realized how punch really took my pain away, and that was a really important fact that really took me into that different, really educational for me to take a look at how terpenes and then take a look at a moisture content and keeping that AW, which we're going to talk more about, I know, in the future here, because I'm talking to Mark a little about active water and both standardization and keeping cannabis fresh for pain control and for other things where you're looking at that same terpene, same freshness. So when something dries out, you're not getting that same effect, but when it's kind of fresh, you get that really nice effect. And well, here in Canada, all places producers are selling really dry, unstandardized cannabis, and I think it's a really big, it's a crisis in my opinion, because they're getting nothing that's going to be effective for me on the legal market yet, and I'm hoping to see we get.
I think you'll be an extract guy once that comes out in October. I can't imagine you doing too much flower anymore when you can just buy the extract, and that same active water won't affect the extracts nearly as much as it extracts the plant matter. Johnny's been going deep down the rabbit hole of active water. I almost always want to call it active water content, but I have been schooled and educated that that's wrong. Johnny's been talking to one of the main scientists at Bovita, who was the guy who designed and developed a lot of the Bovita packs for different moisture contents and whatnot. So he taught John about active water, and then John got a machine, and he's been doing these tests, and it's a pretty important work. You know, once again, you can go write a bloody PhD on any aspect of cannabis, but you know, now you've got companies that are unable to secure the cannabis and seal it properly in a container. And if they are sealing it properly, what are they sealing it with? Is it a glue? And is that glue affected by the gassing off of the terpenes within the package that now eats that glue, pops the package, allows oxygen to come in and have it all mix up together? So this is quite a rabbit hole Johnny's going deep down. We'll probably end up having a hash church about it one of these days, but he's got a bunch of videos, little snippets on his channel at John H. Burfello. And we're going to do a video on Bubble Man's World in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, where we go and get a really good overall view of this, what it is, this active water, you know, which is basically the moisture content within the flower, but also the moisture content in and around the flower within the package that it's within. So it's pretty important, as John has been learning, you know, to give you an idea, what is it like in the high 20s, and that shit turns to dust, John?
Yeah, 28, 29. Breadcrumbs AW is set at 30. Pasta is 50. Most of the cannabis I'm testing is between 29 and 46.
And what do you think it should be, 55 to 60?
55 to 58, I think seems to be what the U.S. government, I've heard some little things that are key coming from governments and stuff like that. 58 seems to be that AW reading that seems to be at a safe zone, where anything at 64 and 65, we know 65 causes more these molds, stuff like that. 62 is kind of people a little scared of that. So I think the 58, and I'm seeing that more with the people that I'm kind of more or less consulting with and talking with and trying to get people on that 58%. And there's relative humidity. There's there's going to be things I really want to talk about. We are going to talk about it on just you and me, Mark, and do a whole section on it, and then probably come back with Hash Church after and get more really deep into it and talk more about it, because something has to be done. And once we get that, I think it's going to set a real standardization for just not just here in Canada, but for around the world, of being able to standardize different strains, different products. And I'm seeing it huge for me, because I've been fighting that standardization by decarboxylating with Dr. Hornby, to trying to standardize my grow with using a 1 part grown bloom. And when it come down to all to the end, it really came down to AW. I really started feeling that keeping this fresh all the time at a certain moisture level really plays a key role in being able to get that same feeling all the time. So it's exciting.
Is that your Jarro Nugs?
Yeah. This is just. I mean, but it's nice. It's fresh. It's perfect. It smells good. It's yeah. It's like if I could only share this with you guys.
Yeah.
One day. Do you find that flowers dry out faster or differently based off different growing styles, Johnny? Say like a soilless medium, or a rock wool aeroponic, or a
hydroponic,
super deep living soil. What's your opinion on how those flowers cure?
Okay, I've seen them because I did some soil testing years and years ago, and I found the more airier stuff kind of dried up quicker, and that was when I was just using it pure cocoa, to be honest. But I was seeing this difference with heat, and then I did different soil mixtures with just Pro Mix, and then like an amendment of cocoa and something else. I really comes down to is the bud. If it's sativa, it's more area, it's going to cure differently. If it's more indica and harder, it's curing differently. I'm seeing a difference just in packaging, and just saying, if say I normally used to package my cannabis to say 62 to 60%, well, that AW is actually 50 to 52 inside a container. So right there, I can tell you what provinces are packaging without using controlled rooms across Canada by testing all the LP weed right now. Just by testing it, I already know what province it's coming from, which is funny. So there's all these little things.
Very interesting. I just gut feeling is that the more microorganisms you have in your rhizosphere, and the more fungal filaments and fine filaments that are activated with minerals and stuff, that it's gonna create better waxes and better trichome cellular walls, and that's gonna affect the gases and the off-gassing. And because I know a lot of farmers that and hash makers that will hang their plants up in a controlled environment for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and some weed that would dry out too fast, and it would just get crumbly and stuff. So that's something that we'd like to see more information on, is just the difference on good conscious cultivating.
Yeah, we're touching on a couple points here. There is a lot of evidence looking at the symbiotic relationship between the soil microbiota, because of the soil bacteria will actually provide mine nutrients out of the minerals, as well as create terpene precursors, and through a symbiotic exchange for glucose, provide minerals as well as terpenes and other nutrients to the plants. So yes, having a more diverse soil microbiota is going to produce greater terpene contents in cannabis varieties. I would hypothesize that different bacteria are going to be providing different nutrients based on their role in the soil ecology. But on top of that, there is quite a bit of published research looking at silica content. Silica content is oftentimes absorbed by the plants and then used in building cell walls. So, and same with calcium, magnesium. Magnesium more for chlorophyll production. So low magnesium soils are going to have less chlorophyll, less that you have to cure out. High silica soils are going to create more woody stalks, but also have thicker cell walls. And then, so there is going to be, we see that the same thing with grapes. Growing grapes in different appellations or terroirs are going to produce slightly different notes based on mineral content of the soil, bacteria in the soil, and even growing conditions.
And even the plant has its own microbiome, which is called the endophytic reaction within the plant. And we know that when we look at, say, the yew tree, there was Taxol that was coming from the yew tree. And what they realized was that the cambium layer within the yew tree, it was actually the endophytes that were creating that Taxol. So what we're really interested in is the interior, that they were interacting to make it medicinal. And we know that this is a medicinal plant with just several different opportunities within its cannabinoid ratios. So I'm really interested in the endophytic reaction within the plant that is actually creating the medicinal compounds. And that's something that, it is really interesting, and that's something that you're going to get through soil diversity and through healthy microbiome. So we talk a lot about the microbiome within the soil. It's really interesting to talk about how that relates to the microbiome actually within the plant.
And this is so huge, because what we've seen, and we're, our sort of group and company is very much involved in hemp specific and cannabis specific. It's all cannabis, but microbiology that really benefits and supports oil production as well as overall, plant health. That's really our area where we love to geek out on. And we've seen both when you've got really that cannabis specific biology in the soil, how it interacts with the biology of the plant, its internal microbiome, and what that does to oil production and terpene production in general. We've seen stronger trichome actual formation structurally, with lower rates of decarboxylation when you've got when it's still on the flower. When we've got the right biology in the soil and in the rhizosphere, and how it's interacting. So both how that relates to the drying out effect, and those increased resonant oil levels, like you were saying, the waxes and lipids, as well as all of those different components, we found that to be really significant for sure. And also speaking to the silica, we've actually found there to be about 4 key pillars, is sort of our feeling, in the soil to really get those highest oil contents, which I think have a big factor also on that drying out approach, but also just quality and everything we've been talking about in terms of those different major quality pieces, and how things dry and result as well. And one of those, the first that we really found, is that first pillar is definitely that hemp specific or cannabis specific microbiology in the soil, and with good diversity at high populations is just crucial, both because of everything from the nutrient availability and absorption, solubilizing, mobilizing, chelating it, and as well as really that comprehensive root health, but also, like you were saying, the stimulating with their secondary metabolites a lot of those biosynthetic pathways that are actually going to be stimulating those synthase enzyme production for cannabinoids and terpenes, and providing those precursors. So we found that to be really crucial for that increased oil production. And then combined with that, having the right carbon levels in the soil in the right forms, sort of in that second pillar, because we need to be able to feed the biology, not just from the root exudates, the glucose that they're naturally producing out, but also having immediately available food sources and slower release kind of habitats for the carbon in the soil. And when you've got that, the microbiology, we've just seen whole other levels of biological activity, which then are stimulating the plants in all these different ways. And you combine that with, those right micronutrients at each developmental stage of the plant, combine that with having all those broad spectrum trace minerals, like you're saying, the silica and a lot of these other ones that we won't even normally talk about as micronutrients. And we've got all 4 of those pillars really dialed in. That's what we've just been seeing, really incredible oil production and just incredible terpene and cannabinoid profiles. Really, we've sort of developed our whole system around optimizing that.
Yeah, I think your root mass is the stomach of the plant. So the better the roots, the better the fruits.
We've been saying that the bigger the roots, the bigger the fruits.
Yep. And are you working on sequestering some of this carbon and carbon capturing that? That's something I've been extremely studying for quite some time, and I'm very interested in that realm.
Yeah, and one of the things, I mean, when you've got high levels of beneficial biology, there are saprophytes that are, you know, carbon eaters in your soil. As they eat that, you know, those exudates and other things.
Oh no, he's muted.
There we go. Yeah, and their necromass really helps to sort of bind and hold a lot of that carbon in the soil. So we found that to be, you know, really supportive on that front as well, for sure. Yeah.
I like what you guys are doing over there at Soil Balance. I've always enjoyed having Peter on. It's great to have you on and discussing and you know, just doing the work. Once again, it's not always something that's so easy to do without, you know, the structure of a company. You know, that's generally what we work under. Like, unless you're like independently wealthy.
Yeah, for sure. A little bit. Yeah, it's breaking up on us.
Seems to be the thing today.
It does.
It does. I'm actually I've used the Soil Balance Pro. I mean, that's your stuff there.
Yeah.
And, I'm also trying this one that's Dr. Mary Jane's plant probiotics. Just give it a shot because I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, totally.
And I saw so much action in my soils that I've actually had to like feed so much more. And a lot of people don't see that. And I've tried both, and like I'm just because I'm always just kind of curious on what's working and stuff like that. But that's the one thing a lot of people that I'm seeing is I'm trying getting more into using these plant soil bases and getting more into looking at the root zones more and more. And as I'm actually increasing all my more activity in my soils, I am seeing different plant lockouts and stuff like that and having to change my nutrients right away. I'm like, whoa, I gotta slow down and stuff like that. So a lot of people have to really take a look at that too for beginner growers and like even people like myself have been growing for a long time. And I start using some of these new soils, and in the beginning I didn't realize it. Now that I'm seeing that, oh yeah, I gotta feed more. I'm used at 7, I'm bumping it up because there's just so much more activity going on, and realizing that's the key.
And we actually developed, because we saw the same thing. You know, you got such heterogeneous soils, and having the beneficial biology is huge, but there's these other pillars, right? Having the right carbon levels, having the right macro micros in the trace. And so what we actually did was, because, you know, it can be so challenging, like, you know, Mark, like you were saying, to get all that stuff dialed in if you don't have that budget, we actually developed a whole system where, you know, we've got those real, you know, cannabis and hemp specific beneficial microbes that are stimulating oil production and getting that boost in terpene profiles. But then we combined it with specific soil testing and biweekly leaf tissue and sap analysis, so that we're actually able to check, you know, you're doing like a CO2 and an H2O soil analysis right off the bat to check what nutrients are currently plant available and which ones are still locked up in reserve, so that we can actually start really getting precise and tracking what that nutrient cycling is going to be like in a really highly biologically active soil. And then once you get and then once you get the biweekly leaf tissue and sap analysis, then you can actually track what's in excess or deficiency, not just at current time at each stage, but what will be. That's what's so cool about the sap analysis. You're going to catch deficiencies and excesses, you know, 2 to 3 weeks out before they show up as symptoms, before they reduce yield, profiles, potency, and get all of those things optimized. Yeah. And when you, and it's so crucial for a highly biologically active soil, like you were saying, Johnny, because it's, when you get that increased nutrient cycling, you need to be able to adjust both the macro micronutrients, make sure you've got the carbon in the right forms. And when you combine all these testing that we've got in the system, you can make the fertility recommendations to go with that really high levels of beneficial biology. That's when we've seen just that mind-blowing epigenetic expression. It's like taking whatever that genotype is capable of and really optimizing and amplifying it. So that's what we've been putting together to support growers. Yeah. Sorry, go for it.
Have you been working on different types of mediums? Because, you know, for instance, cocoa versus just soil versus you know, rock wool. You know, every medium holds nutrients in a different way. Cocoa holds certain things back, and soil lets certain things through. And you know, so have you worked on the dynamics of that alone? Have you guys been focusing on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been growing with growers using a whole bunch of different mediums, both living soils, cocos, different things, aeroponics, hydroponics. And so it's something we've been looking at, and how, and one of the reasons, again, for all this precision testing that we've sort of built into our system is because, like you just said, there is no one size fits all.
Right. There's no silver bullet.
There's no silver bullet. Everything is going to be different. And the more we can really get precise in helping each grower or farmer on a larger, small scale really dial in all of those different pillars, that's when we've just seen just the amazing results, and both in being able to grow, the flower and the oil and the extracts that are going to be most medicinal for the people who need it. And yeah, it's really exciting for us, that art.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah, well, thank you. We love being able to support.
That's awesome.
Well, what a great episode of Hash Church today. That was a solid 3 hours, like almost without a break in conversation. I know I have to read what Sam said because he definitely wanted me to read this. So that was what he said was, this week in Colorado, the USA's first plant breeder rights for cannabis under UPOV were applied for. This is the alternative to plant patents and is what fruit and veggie and flower plant breeders use. So that's what he had said. I had heard most of what he had said when he had mentioned that earlier. I'm not sure if you guys did, but there you go, Sam. I know you're not in the room anymore, but I did say what you wrote me. Maybe an hour and a half after you wrote it, but nonetheless. So yeah, I think things look good to maybe continue the conversation next week and get a little more deep into some of these conversations and topics. And as always, thank you all so much for coming in. Thanks for your perspective, Beth, for sharing your perspective with us and coming and hanging out. And thanks, Potent Ponics, Steve, for linking me up with you and sending me your email and getting me to invite you in. And always a pleasure, Wade.
Right back at you, Marcus.
Your laughter.
Beautiful day.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for coming out, dude, and hanging out and sharing time with us and sharing a dialogue with us. And it's your perspective's always appreciated, and we do love having you here on Hash Church. And everyone else, Mr. West, thank you so much for dropping serious knowledge bombs today and just dropping in-depth knowledge about everything. You're just a fucking encyclopedia, dude. It's completely ridiculous.
Well, it's something that I'm certainly passionate about, because we want to be able to create good corporate and ecologically social responsible companies, but at the same time we want to be able to assure that the community at large, the patients at large, still maintain access. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a need for testing companies to help breeders develop these lines. There is a need for nurseries to help distribute these lines. And in some regards, there's a need to be able to develop rights or whatever, some commerce in those genetics, but we want to do it in a way that it doesn't take away from the industry. So, all the people on the call, all the people watching it need to be able to, understand and differentiate and really support the growers and breeders that are trying to promote safe access, not trying to capitalize off of limited access. Because
that's it right there. That's it in a nutshell right there. That's it. Just make it fair and don't try to limit access and control off limit access. I'm also hear the words of Sam. If someone spends millions of dollars and there's PhDs are hired that had to go to school for years to get their PhD, and the cost of the infrastructure and the greenhouses and the breeding, and if incredible work is done and novel cannabinoid profiles are produced with unique novel terpene expressions that we've never seen in the black market, like, is it going to chap my ass if someone somehow puts a plant breeder rights on that? Probably not. I'd probably be more like the glass half full guy, kind of like, wow, like they did a lot of work to create something that wasn't really readily available, and now it's going to be available. Like, you might be able to buy it and lease their cultivar, or you'll be able to purchase the end product of it that's sold through whatever companies they make the deal. But people are always just like, it's the internet nowadays. It's like the wild, wild west with the keyboards. People just have strong personal opinions they want to share about everything, and It's crazy how fast you just make a wrong statement in social media, and it's like everyone just attacks you. Devouring our own next on Church. Thank you, everyone, Colin and Jeff and Johnny B and Skunkman Sam and the Turners who were here earlier. And I'm sure I'm forgetting people, Josh and Kelly, as always, DEM Pure, and Josh, who came in early, Dutch Blooms, who's doing the aquaponics thing. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming out, and thanks all the people who are watching and spent their Saturday morning or afternoon chilling out with us for 3 hours. We will see you next week. I'm going to make sure of it, and hopefully some of these great people will return. Peace out, everybody.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.